The chamber is open and full of whispers, stones sweating, water dripping, breath rattling in a 12-year-old chest that is already losing the rhythm of life. What if the boy who lived story ended here in the dark, before anyone even knew the war had truly begun again? Harry is already on the floor when we arrive. Bitten, venom burning through him in waves that make his vision pulse black at the edges. The basilisk lies dead beside him, its massive body coiled in a final frozen strike, but victory feels thin and far away. Ginny Weasley is a pale shape on the cold stone, hair spread around her like blood. She doesn't move, she doesn't scream. She just breathes in shallow stolen sips, because the diary has taken almost everything. Tom Riddle watches it all with cold curiosity. Not rage, not fear, just the clinical interest of a predator testing a trap. His shade stands over Harry, half solid, half smoke, the edges of him flickering with every failing heartbeat in the room. He stares at the boy who is supposed to be his undoing and waits to see whether this child will manage one more miracle. Above them, wings beat, a flare of gold and scarlet in the gloom. Fawkes dives through the stale air, song already cracking with urgency, but the timing is wrong. A heartbeat too late. Phoenix claws scrape stone as he lands beside Harry, but the venom has been working while Riddle smiled and the basilisk's corpse cooled. Harry reaches. Fingers shaking, skin already clammy, he gropes for the black diary that started it all. The sword of Gryffindor is slick in his other hand, heavy, poisoned blood drying along its gleaming edge. Short reach, short breath, long desperate intention that has always been his only real spell against the dark. His hand slips. Steel hits stone with a ringing crack that echoes off the carved serpents. The sword skids away, spinning, clattering into the shadows beyond his reach. Harry's body arches once, a final, helpless fight against the basilisk venom pouring through his veins. Fawkes screams, a raw, tearing sound that should have shattered curses, and tears fall, clear, bright, impossibly powerful, onto skin that is already going still. They do not work on the dead. In the heavy silence that follows, the chamber feels even larger, colder. The air hangs thick with grief that hasn't yet had time to understand itself. Ginny lies there, breathing but empty. Harry lies there, not breathing at all. The night everything changed, and no one above knows it yet. The diary remains untouched. It lands beside Ginny's hand, its cover unpierced, its pages humming with a piece of soul that should have been destroyed. Riddle's shade flickers, then steadies, drawing strength from the girl he hollowed out. He is translucent, but not gone. The basilisk's corpse coils around the truth, hiding it in plain sight. The first Horcrux, intact beneath a school full of children. What if this is where the legend ends? No prophecy-fulfilling showdown. No wand locked with wand in a blaze of green and red. Just stone, blood, and silence under Hogwarts while the world above carries on. What if the boy who lived actually died here at 12, and this was the night Voldemort truly won and no one realized it yet? This is that story. What if the boy who lived never walked out? The chamber is open and full of whispers. Stone, blood, silence. In canon, this is where everything turns. Fawkes arrives in time. The tears fall in time. Harry's heart keeps stuttering along just long enough for magic to grab hold and drag him back. He stabs the diary, Tom Riddle screams, and the first Horcrux dies in a spray of ink and venom. Not here. Here his heart has already stopped. Fawkes lands on cold stone, not a dying boy. There is no shallow breath to catch, no faint pulse to coax into strength. Phoenix tears can heal venom, close wounds, knit skin. But they do not drag a soul back across that final line. By the time the first tear hits Harry's skin, the boy who lived is dead. The spell is broken, but the vessel remains. Tom Riddle's shade flickers when the basilisk falls, when the wand is wrenched from Ginny's fingers, when the diary is knocked aside in the struggle, but it does not die. No fang pierces old leather. No venom soaks the pages. The Horcrux lies intact beneath a school full of children, humming softly in the dark. In the books we know, Harry walks out of the chamber and quietly resets the board. He destroys a Horcrux without knowing the word, hands Lucius Malfoy a ruined diary, and gives Dobby his freedom. He goes back to Privet Drive. The war sleeps a little longer. In this story, he doesn't walk out at all. What if Ginny wakes on the cold floor, head pounding, memories frayed, and sees not a saviour holding out his hand, but a boy her age lying motionless beside her? What if the first thing she understands is that someone died to pull her free, and that it still wasn't enough to finish the job? The guilt would cut through the grief like a knife. Her scream would echo off the pillars, raw and animal, until Fawkes is forced to carry that sound up into the world above. What if Dumbledore follows the Phoenix down and finds two things waiting for him? Harry's body and an old diary that tastes wrong to every sense he has. He has studied Horcruxes. He knows the feel of a torn soul. In canon, he has to reconstruct the pattern years later from scars and guesses. Here, he is handed the evidence on the night everything changed. What if the wizarding world loses its symbol before the war even starts? No third-year Patronus blazing against Dementors. No Triwizard champion defying Voldemort to his face. No boy who keeps choosing to stand back up. Instead, the legend ends at 12, and the adults who built their hopes on a prophecy have to ask themselves whether they ever had the right to. The emotional arc inverts. In the original series, the war grinds Harry down by inches. Each year peels away another layer: childhood, safety, trust, until there is nothing left but a boy walking into a forest to die. Here, the death comes first. The story begins with a body on the chamber floor and asks how everyone else carries that weight forward. This is that story, because without Harry there is no single chosen one to absorb the prophecy, no convenient hero to throw at every crisis. There is only Ginny, shaking and blood-stained. Ron and Hermione waiting above, not yet knowing that their world has just split in two. The Weasleys, about to be told that the boy who shared their table is gone. Dumbledore, forced to confront the cost of his own choices years too early. Snape, staring at Lily's son and seeing every promise he failed. They are the ones left to fight the war Harry never reaches. They are the ones who will have to become something he never got to be. And down in the dark, the diary waits. The night Hogwarts breaks. Immediate aftermath in the chamber. The chamber is not quiet. It breathes. Water drips from the stone jaws of Salazar's statue. The basilisk's corpse sprawls in a wet, reeking curve. And in the middle of that obscene stillness, 3 sets of footsteps echo. Sharp, urgent, already carrying the weight of the night, everything changed. Dumbledore first, McGonagall at his shoulder. Lockhart stumbling behind, pale and useless, his wand hanging from limp fingers. They see the basilisk. They see Ginny, small and crumpled on the cold stone, red hair spread like blood. For half a heartbeat, there is hope. She moves. She breathes. Then McGonagall's gasp cuts through the grief like a knife, because behind her, sprawled where he fell, is Harry, his glasses cracked, his robes torn and stiff with blood and venom. The sword of Gryffindor fallen from his hand, the edge still slick with dark, glistening poison. One look, and Dumbledore knows. There are spells for diagnosis, for stabilizing, for buying seconds. He doesn't reach for them. He just stares. What if I'd come sooner? The thought is not words so much as a blow. He feels Fawkes shift on his shoulder, feathers trembling, a low, broken sound in his throat that is not a song. Ginny wakes to that sound, not to a spell, not to a voice, to the keening of a phoenix above a dead boy. Her eyes flutter open. The world swims. The last things she remembers are water, hissing, Tom's laughter wrapping around her ribs. She remembers the diary in her hands, the quill moving when she didn't want it to, the way her own fingers had written hurtful words to people she loved. Then nothing. Harry. Her voice is a rasp. She tries to sit up. Pain lances through her chest. Then she sees his body and the truth hits her with brutal, simple clarity. She is alive because someone else isn't. Memories slam back in jagged fragments, her feet carrying her into the chamber against her will, her wand raised at Ron, at Percy, at first-year students who stared at her in the corridors and then screamed in the dark. Tom's hand on her shoulder, warm and wrong. His promise. I'll take care of it, Ginny. I'll fix everything. Her stomach heaves. She can't even turn away in time. Dumbledore kneels beside Harry, but his gaze flickers past the boy to the stone floor, to the small, black book lying there, unmarred. No scorch marks, no venom burns, no sign that it has been through a war at all. He can feel it, a faint, greasy echo in the air where Tom Riddle's memory stood only minutes ago. Magic that doesn't dissipate the way a simple spell should. Magic that clings. This is not just a cursed object. This is that story. "Minerva," he says quietly, "take Miss Weasley. Get her to Madame Pomfrey and send for the Weasleys, all of them." McGonagall's composure fractures for a heartbeat, but she obeys. Ginny clutches at Harry's sleeve as they lift her, fingers smearing blood across his arm before she's pulled away, sobbing without sound. Once a raw, disbelieving bark. No. Once a raw, disbelieving bark. No, he's just out, right? You can fix it. You always fix it. His eyes dart between Dumbledore and McGonagall, searching for the reassurance that never comes. "Professor, say something. Cast something." Dumbledore doesn't answer. By the time they reach the bathroom, Hermione is there, pale, wide-eyed. She's been freed from the hospital wing on Dumbledore's order, told only that Harry and Ron were in danger. She sees the stretcher, the slackness of Harry's face, and her mind does what Hermione's mind always does. It catalogues details. No rise and fall of his chest. No phoenix tears on his skin. No one moving with urgency that suggests a chance. Her legs fold. She doesn't scream. She doesn't cry. She just stops. The Weasleys arrive as word ripples through the castle. Arthur pushes through the crowd first, tie askew, eyes wild. Molly is right behind him, already shaking her head as if she can will the scene away. They see Ginny on a stretcher, pale and shaking. Relief detonates in Molly's chest. She's alive. And then, an instant later, grief crashes in when she understands what that life cost. Her gaze finds Harry. She collapses before anyone can catch her. The Great Hall becomes a place of wails and whispers, of students staring in stunned, horrified silence as the boy who lived is laid out on a staff table, small and still. The war they thought was a story has just claimed its most famous survivor. Hours later, when the hall is cleared and the castle has cried itself hoarse, Dumbledore goes back down. Alone. The chamber feels different now. Emptier. Colder. The basilisk's body is beginning to stink in earnest. Water still drips. The echoes of what happened cling to the air. He conjures gloves before he touches the diary. Even through Dragonhide it feels wrong. Heavy in a way that isn't about weight. The magic in it hums under his fingertips, ancient and defiant. He remembers another boy, another war, another Tom who chose to split his soul rather than face his own mortality. He remembers the research he buried, the theories he never shared with the Ministry, the quiet, terrible conclusion he reached about what Voldemort had done to himself. Horcrux. The word doesn't pass his lips, but it's there, coiled behind his teeth. "This is not over," he whispers instead, voice scraping against the stone. "Not for Voldemort, and not for Hogwarts." His eyes linger on the sword's venom-stained edge, on the distance between it and the untouched diary. One more step, one more second, one more choice, and this could have ended here. What if Harry had lived long enough to take it? Above him, the castle shifts in its sleep, unaware of the thing that still beats, faint and patient, in the book he holds. Dumbledore closes the diary. The sound is very soft, but in the dark, something answers. And this time, there is no boy to stand in its way. Rewriting the legend. How the wizarding world hears the news. The news does not break. It shatters. By the time the students are called to the Great Hall, rumours have already run ahead of the truth, twisted and breathless. Ginny Weasley is alive. Harry Potter is not. The boy who walked into the walls beneath their feet is dead, and no one can quite believe the word. Dumbledore stands at the podium, more statue than man. The candles burn low. The ceiling shows only flat, depthless cloud. When he speaks, his voice does not boom. It threads through the silence, thin and steady, as if any louder and it might crack. "Harry James Potter," he says, and hundreds of heads lift. Hundreds of children stare. tonight in the Chamber of Secrets gave his life to save another. The phrase is careful, chosen. A spell cast over the room. He does not say basilisk. He does not say diary. He does not say that a 12-year-old boy walked into an ancient war alone because no adult got there first. He gives them a story they can hold. A perfect hero, a clear choice. The night everything changed. At the Slytherin table, there are white faces and clenched jaws. At Gryffindor, Ron's hands shake against the wood. Hermione's throat burns. The word martyr would cut through the grief like a knife if anyone dared speak it. Cornelius Fudge arrives before dawn, ash on his cloak from hurried flu travel and calculation already in his eyes. By breakfast, the Ministry has its narrative. The boy who lived died in glorious sacrifice. The danger is past. Hogwarts is safe. The chamber has been addressed. Not cleansed, not explained. What if parents heard the unvarnished truth? That a monster older than their great-grandparents has been stalking the pipes, that their children have been walking over the bones of a girl dead for 50 years, that a piece of Voldemort's soul has been whispering from a schoolgirl's book? They don't. Instead, the Daily Prophet runs with it. Boy who lived. Dies a hero ministry ensures Hogwarts security. The ink is barely dry before the Howlers arrive. They scream across the breakfast tables, scarlet envelopes bursting open to hurl blame at Dumbledore, at the Board of Governors, at the faceless security failures of a castle that has always pretended to be unassailable. Some parents pull their children out that very day. Others demand Dumbledore's resignation, their fury fueled by headlines that quietly reassure them the worst is over. But in the staff room, in the hospital wing where Ginny sobs herself hoarse, in the office where Dumbledore sits alone with a blackened diary that should not exist, the story is uglier. There is fear. There is guilt. There are questions that refuse to die. How did a Horcrux reach a child's cauldron? Why does Tom Riddle's shade look so very much like the boy Dumbledore once recruited and failed? What if this is not an isolated relic but a pattern? He does not share the word Horcrux, not yet. He buries it under occlumency and lemon drops, under the public grief for a fallen saviour. But in his mind, the prophecy shifts. The one with the power to vanquish the Dark Lord no longer has Harry's face. It becomes something looser, more dangerous, a possibility instead of a person. Neville Longbottom, a collective resistance, a war fought without its symbol. This is that story. Outside, the prophet sells out by noon. Inside, Dumbledore locks the diary away and begins, silently, to plan for a world where the boy who lived will never walk back through the doors of Hogwarts. And beneath the castle, in stone still damp with basilisk blood, the echo of Riddle's laughter has not quite faded. The prophecy. Without Harry, who is left to stand against Voldemort? Up in the tower, the castle has gone to bed. Dumbledore has not. His office is all shadows and phoenix song. Fawkes's low, aching notes the only sound brave enough to cut through the grief like a knife. On the desk, the diary, inert and smug in its silence. In Dumbledore's mind, another voice entirely. A memory. A prophecy. The one with the power to vanquish the Dark Lord approaches. Sybil's harsh, trance-strained tone echoes as clearly as if she stood before him now. He closes his eyes. He can see the dingy room at the Hog's Head. He can smell the dust. He can feel in his bones the moment the story of this war narrowed to a single child. Born to those who have thrice defied him, or born as the 7th month dies. That line had always mattered less, until the night everything changed. For years it was simple. 2 boys fit the words, 2 July birthdays, 2 sets of parents in the order who had faced Voldemort 3 times and lived. Harry Potter, Neville Longbottom. The prophecy did not name which. It offered only a shape, a choice, a terrible fork in the road. And Voldemort, in his arrogance, had chosen for them. He had gone after the Potters, marked Harry as his equal. And in doing so, he had written Harry into the centre of the story and pushed Neville to the margins, a quiet boy with shaking hands and a toad that kept escaping. But what if the Dark Lord chose wrong? Or not wrong? Dumbledore's jaw tightens. Just incompletely. Harry is dead. The words are a spell he cannot uncast. The boy who lived will not grow old enough to understand why he was asked to bear so much. The war has not ended. The diary on his desk pulses with that truth. One Horcrux at least, still intact. Perhaps more, still hidden. Voldemort is wounded, not gone. So what does a prophecy do when its first path is severed? Does fate simply stop? Or does it shift its weight to the other child who always fit, the one who was nearly chosen and then forgotten? Neville Longbottom. Awkward, earnest, already marked by loss in a different way. Parents not dead, but worse than dead. Minds shattered in Saint. Mungos, victims of a war he was too young to remember, but old enough to feel every time he visits them. A boy who stares at his shoes when called on. A boy who still stood up to his friends in first year, shaking and stubborn. Dumbledore's hands curl on the arms of his chair. He built an entire strategy around a baby in a crib, around a scar on a forehead, and a legend the child never asked for. He told himself there was no choice, that this was the only way to end it. And now that child lies cold beneath the school he swore to protect. Can he do it again? Can he look at Neville, already carrying the quiet, constant grief of living orphans, and decide that destiny has come for him next? That this is that story now. Not of one saviour, but of the boy everyone underestimated being dragged to the front lines? Fawkes shifts, feathers rustling. The phoenix stares at him, dark eyes unblinking, as if waiting for the decision Dumbledore has been circling since the chamber. If the war is returning, Dumbledore whispers, voice raw, it will not wait for us to mourn. He looks at the diary, at the closed door, at the empty perch where a small black-haired boy used to stand and ask too many questions. Neville, he says at last, almost to himself. Fawkes answers with a single, low note. Not agreement, not refusal, just acknowledgement. The choice has been made, quietly, terribly. If Voldemort rises again, Hogwarts will not be able to hide behind legends and old victories. Another child will have to step into a war that never really ended. And somewhere in Gryffindor Tower, Neville Longbottom sleeps on, unaware that a dead boy's burden is already reaching for him. Ginny Weasley's burden, survivor's guilt, and a new obsession. The hospital wing is too bright. White sheets, white walls, white, merciless light. It should have felt safe. Instead, for Ginny Weasley, it felt like punishment. She sat rigid in her bed, fingers twisted in the blanket, refusing, absolutely refusing to look at the empty space where another bed ought to be, where Harry should have been. If she turned her head, she knew what she'd see. Nothing. No messy black hair. No boy who had followed her into the dark and not come back out. The thought cut through the grief like a knife. Harry Potter was dead because she had written in a diary, because she had trusted a voice in the pages more than the living people around her. Her mother hovered. Molly barely slept, barely ate, smoothing Ginny's hair back every few minutes, as if touch alone could anchor her daughter to the world. Her voice was soft and frantic and constant, fussing about potions and rest and food. Overprotective didn't begin to cover it. Molly was building a fortress out of worry, brick by brick, around the last girl she had. Arthur was different. He sat in the chair beside Ginny's bed and stared at the far wall, hands folded, knuckles white. He spoke rarely. When he did, his words were careful, measured, as if anything louder might shatter the thin glass of control. The war he had tried to keep at arm's length had reached into his family and closed its hand around his daughter's throat. What if this was only the beginning? The twins were there, but the twins were wrong. No whispered pranks. No jokes. Fred's jaw clenched. George's eyes kept flicking to that empty space where Harry was not. They had lost a brother in all but blood, and there was no spell to fix it. Their silence screamed louder than anything they could have said. Ron was a storm with nowhere to go. He paced. He sat. He shot helpless, angry looks at Ginny and then flinched, as if hating himself for even that. Grief for his best friend, terror for his sister, and the sick, guilty thought he couldn't voice. If Harry died for her, what did that make all of them? At night, the hospital wing changed. The lamps dimmed. The whispers faded. And Ginny dreamed. Cold stone, wet footsteps, the diary in her hand, pages fluttering in a wind that wasn't there. Tom Riddle's handsome hollow face leaning close, his eyes going from kind to cruel in a blink. She heard herself speak in a voice that wasn't hers. She saw Harry fall again and again, the basilisk's fangs sinking in, his body hitting the floor of the chamber with a sound that echoed forever. She woke up choking on a scream, nails biting into her palms. Every time she remembered one thing more, a phrase, a sensation. The way it felt when the diary drank her secrets and fed her back power. Possession, Dumbledore had called it, in words she wasn't meant to hear. Because Ginny listened. She listened when Dumbledore came to speak to her parents in low, grave tones at the end of the ward. She kept her breathing slow, her eyes nearly closed, and heard the words no one explained to her. Horcrux, fragment of soul, darkest magic. The diary had not just controlled her, it had been him. Voldemort, younger and yet the same, using her hands to write his story in blood. Arthur's voice was raw. If that thing had survived, it must be found, Dumbledore answered, the calm in his tones stretched thin. Destroyed, utterly. Basilisk venom, fiend fire. Ordinary spells will not be enough. We cannot risk Tom's insurance policy remaining in this school. Insurance. Ginny swallowed hard. Harry had gone down there to save her from a piece of Voldemort's soul, and died for it. From that night, the fear shifted. The guilt stayed, heavy and suffocating, but something sharp grew beneath it. A need, an obsession. She needed to understand exactly what had crawled into her mind and worn her skin. How it whispered, how it worked, how it could be killed. She began to ask questions no one wanted to answer. About Imperius, about legilimency, about possession and cursed objects, and the First War her parents never spoke about in detail. When they deflected, she watched, and listened, and learned where the silences were. Those silences told their own story. This is that story. The night everything changed for Ginny Weasley was not in the chamber. It was in that hospital bed, staring straight ahead so she wouldn't have to see the emptiness where Harry should be. That was when she made a choice. Quiet and absolute. If Harry Potter had died to drag her out of the dark, then she would spend the rest of her life walking back into it on purpose. She would learn the rules of this war. She would learn Voldemort's magic. And one day when the chance came, she would make sure that a dead boy's sacrifice actually meant something. The question was, when that chance finally appeared, would anyone be ready to let a small, freckled girl be the one to take it? Ron and Hermione, without Harry. A broken trio rewrites its purpose. In the weeks after the chamber, the trio isn't broken in some poetic, dignified way. It's jagged, ugly, immediate. Ron starts sitting at the far end of the Gryffindor table. Hermione eats early or late, vanishing before he arrives. The empty space between them is louder than any argument. Every joke they shared, every plan, every whispered midnight choice in the common room had Harry at the centre. Without him, even passing the pumpkin juice feels wrong. Silence becomes a fourth presence. It sits with them in class, in the common room, in the dorms where one bed is now too neat, trunk sealed, wand locked away in McGonagall's office. Ron stares at that bed until his vision blurs. Hermione stares at her notes until the ink runs where tears fell. Neither of them says his name out loud. Ron's anger comes first, hot, directionless. He punches his pillow until his knuckles bruise. He snaps at Seamus, at Percy, at anyone who dares say, boy who lived in the past tense. If he couldn't protect his best friend, if he couldn't protect his little sister, what good is he in this war? He replays the day the chamber opened, Lockhart's cowardice, the adults' panic, Dumbledore's absence. He remembers his broken wand, the useless spell that backfired, the way he was left behind when Harry went on alone. His resentment toward the adults who failed them grows with every sleepless night. They were supposed to be the ones who knew what if something went wrong. They were supposed to stop 12-year-olds from dying under the school. Hermione's grief moves in the opposite direction. Inward. Precise. She buries herself in the library so deeply, Madame Pince starts leaving lamps burning for her without comment. Basilisk venom. Phoenix tears. Ancient resurrection theories. Dumbledore would never approve a second year to read. She hunts for the one line in one book that might have saved him. She copies diagrams of phoenix tears until her hand cramps, circling every mention that they heal venom but not the dead. She reads about soul magic and Horcrux rumours she's not supposed to understand. If Fawkes appeared for Harry once, could there have been another spell? Another ritual? Another choice? The questions cut through the grief like a knife. The night everything changed for the two of them isn't the night Harry died. It's a week later when Hermione walks into the empty common room and finds Ron there alone, staring into the fire. He doesn't look at her when he speaks. "It should have been me," he says, short, flat. "I was the one with Ginny. I was the one who dragged Lockhart. My wand was rubbish. I slowed him down. If I'd been better, he wouldn't have gone in alone." Hermione's throat tightens. She sinks into the armchair opposite him, hands shaking. "I keep thinking," she whispers, "if I'd read faster, if I'd realised about the pipe sooner, if I'd gone past most basilisks die young and found the one paragraph on phoenixes in battle, there had to be something I missed." Ron finally looks up. His eyes are red, but dry. "You always find the answers?" "Not this time." The words taste like failure. "He's dead, Ron. All my research, all my revising, and when it mattered, I didn't know the right spell." The fire pops between them. For a moment, there's nothing but shared breathing and the low roar of flames. Then Ron says, very quietly, "If he died fighting a memory, what happens when the real Voldemort comes back?" Hermione has already been asking herself the same question. What if the diary wasn't just a cursed object, but something worse? What if this was only the first move in a war no one else is preparing for? "This doesn't end in the chamber," she says. "It can't. If he died down there, then we don't get to stop. Not ever." Ron swallows. "Together?" Her answer is immediate. "If we can, but even if we can't, we still do it. It isn't a grand vow. It's a fragile pact made under flickering torchlight. If Harry Potter died fighting Voldemort's shadow, then they will spend their lives hunting the real thing. They don't know yet that this choice will drag them into secrets Dumbledore has tried to bury, into prophecies and Horcruxes, and a war far bigger than a single dead boy. They only know one thing. This is that story. Pattern break. Jump back to Godric's Hollow and a different lost boy. But before that war can swallow them, the story jerks sideways. Smash cut. Cold air. Screaming wind over a ruined village. Godric's Hollow. Halloween, 1981. The night everything changed. The Potter cottage is blown open. Roof torn. Walls blackened with spell scorch. Glass crunches under Aura boots. A door hangs from one hinge, swinging in the draught with a hollow, rhythmic knock that sounds too much like a heartbeat. James lies in the entrance hall, dead, eyes staring at nothing. Lily is upstairs in the nursery, hair fanned out, arm flung wide as if she died reaching. And in the cot, a baby screams. Harry's cheeks are wet, his forehead bleeding around a fresh, angry lightning scar. The war has just drawn a circle around this child and named him Legend. Fawkes is nowhere. There is no phoenix song, only human voices, shocked and hoarse, trying to understand how Voldemort could be gone and this boy still alive. Now pattern break again. Same night. Different house. A modest home in a quieter part of the country shudders under another kind of fear. Curtains drawn, wards humming. Inside, Frank and Alice Longbottom sit tense on the sofa, wands within reach. Baby Neville clutches a stuffed toy, wide-eyed, staring at the door as if he can feel the war pressing against it. On the wireless, they're saying, "You-know-who is dead." On the mantel, the clock hands twitch uncertainly between mortal peril and home. Augusta Longbottom stands rigid by the radio, vulture hat set aside for once, grey hair escaping its pins. The announcer stumbles over the details. Potters, Godric's Hollow, Killing Curse, Rebounded. A baby who lived. Augusta doesn't smile. Her eyes narrow, because she knows the prophecy, or at least enough of it. A child born as the 7th month dies, destined to have power the Dark Lord knows not. 2 boys fit, 2 families marked, and Voldemort chose. What if he had gone to the Longbottoms instead? What if Neville had been the one in a ruined nursery, scarred and screaming while Harry slept safely in a crib miles away? What if the most important choice in this war was nothing more than which address a monster walked toward first? Voldemort chose Harry, not because Harry was stronger, because of a rumour, a spy's whisper, a whim. A fragile, terrible decision that cut through the grief like a knife and rewrote both boys' lives before they could crawl. The Potter's cottage is ash. The Longbottoms' home is intact. But Augusta hears the crack in the world. She hears it in the tremor of the wireless announcer's voice, in the strained calm of Dumbledore's brief statement, in the sudden hungry silence when the music cuts in. She looks at Neville, at his soft, uncertain hands, at the way he flinches when a distant firework goes off outside. Her jaw tightens. "This isn't over," she murmurs, though no one has said it is. The war does not end because a Dark Lord's body falls, not when prophecies still hang over cradles. Narrators aside, this is why we're here. We are not just losing Harry in a chamber under a school, we are circling back to the boy who almost was the chosen one, because in this version of the story, he may have no choice about becoming exactly that. Cut forward. Dirt falls on a small coffin. The world moves in cruel, ordinary motions. Harry's grave is barely filled when Dumbledore knocks on Augusta Longbottom's door, prophecy heavy on his tongue. Dumbledore's second gamble, approaching the Longbottoms. St. Mungo's smells of spellburn and potions and old stale grief. On the Janus Thicky ward, a witch with straw-coloured hair hums tunelessly to herself and hands a healer a crumpled bubblegum wrapper as if it's treasure. Beside her, a man once feared by Death Eaters stares at a blank wall, fingers twitching in phantom wand movements. Alice and Frank Longbottom are alive, but the war has already killed almost everything that made them themselves. They do not know it is about to reach for their son too. Augusta Longbottom walks between the beds like she is marching into battle. Hat bristling with a vulture, spine rigid, eyes red-rimmed but dry. She has just buried one boy the world called Saviour. She is not prepared to discuss another. Dumbledore waits at the end of the ward, blue eyes dulled, hands folded on the head of his cane. He looks older than the hospital, older than the war. When Augusta stops before him, there is a long, brittle silence. "Why are you here?" she asks. Not polite, not curious, a demand. "Because," Dumbledore says quietly, "the night everything changed may not be the night we thought." He leads her to an empty visitor's room. The door shuts with a soft click that somehow sounds final. Neville, told to wait on the stairs outside, sits down on the cold stone, knees hugged to his chest. He is 11, soft-faced, shoulders hunched in the oversized jumper his gran knitted. He is used to being told to wait. He is not used to hearing the word dead in whispers that cut through the grief like a knife. "Harry Potter is dead," Augusta repeats, voice flat. "You wrote those words in your letter, Albus. Do not dress them up now." Neville flinches. Harry. Dead. The syllables don't fit together in his head. Harry was the boy who lived. Wasn't that the whole story? Inside the room, Dumbledore lowers his voice. "There was a prophecy," he begins. "You remember I mentioned it when Frank and Alice were attacked. A child born as the 7th month dies." "Turns," Augusta snaps. "Born as the 7th month turns. You told us it pointed to Potter." "I told you Voldemort believed it did." The name makes her jaw clench, but he presses on. But the prophecy spoke of 2 boys, Harry and Neville. Outside, Neville catches only splinters. Prophecy. Voldemort. Choice. His own name dropped into that current. He stares at the banister, fingers digging into the wood, heart pounding so loud it drowns out some of the words, but not their weight. "What if," Augusta says slowly, "by failing to protect one child, you have decided to gamble the other?" Dumbledore does not deny it. If Voldemort returns, and I fear he will, the magic that bound him to Harry may now seek another path. The war is not over. The prophecy may yet demand balance. Augusta's fury is quiet, lethal. "You stood in my sitting room and told me my son was a hero. Then I watched auras carry him out screaming. You told me Alice was brave. I have watched her hand me sweet wrappers for 10 years. You will not take my grandson and turn him into a weapon to finish a war your first plan failed to end." Neville's throat tightens. Weapon. War. Is that what Harry was? Is that what he has to be? "This is not what I wish," Dumbledore says, and for once the mask slips enough that Augusta sees the man underneath, hollowed by his own choices. But I would be more monstrous still if I pretended he was safe by pretending the prophecy died with Harry. The room holds its breath. So does the boy on the stairs. "What are you asking?" Augusta says at last. "That we prepare Neville," Dumbledore answers. "Quietly, thoroughly, that we give him training Harry never had until it was almost too late, that if the prophecy turns its gaze to him, he will not stand alone and afraid." Augusta stares at the closed door to the ward, to the beds where her son and daughter-in-law sit in their living death. She pictures Neville, small and soft-spoken, tending his plants in the back garden. A child, not a saviour. "What if I say no?" she asks. "Then I will respect your choice," Dumbledore says, "and fear it will cost him his life." The words land heavier than any spell. Augusta Longbottom has already buried too many futures. She will not bury one more because she was afraid to look a prophecy in the eye. "You may train him," she says finally, each word dragged up from somewhere raw. "But on my terms, in my house, under my supervision. You will teach him to live, Albus, not just to die more usefully than Harry Potter did." Her voice does not break on Harry's name. Neville's does, silently, on the stairs. "And hear me," Augusta finishes. "You will not make my grandson into a legend. You will not tell him he is destined to die for your greater good. If you must have a chosen one, he will be a boy first." Dumbledore bows his head. "On that," he says, "you have my word." Neville does not understand the full shape of the conversation, but he understands enough. Harry is dead. Voldemort is not. And somehow, impossibly, the story has turned and is now pointing at him. This is that story. The diary that lived. Voldemort's hidden Horcrux under Hogwarts. Dumbledore waits until the castle sleeps. His office is a cathedral of ticking things and soft phoenix feathers when he finally sets the diary on his desk. The black cover is unmarked, innocent. It should have been dead in the chamber with the boy who bled out on the stone. But it is here, whole, silent. He stares at it for a long time before he dares a spell. Specialis Revelio. The magic hits the leather and skids off, hissing. Not a curse then, not merely a cursed object. Something deeper, older, wrong. The realization does not come all at once. It seeps in, steady and cold, as he layers detection charms, containment wards, and finally, with a grimace, lowers it into a shallow, pensive basin. What if memory itself could be teased out of it? He touches his wand to the spine. Silver light spills, ink thin, into the stone basin. Not a memory. A presence. A boy's outline, sharp and handsome, coalesces in the swirling light, eyes bright with that familiar, terrible hunger. Tom Marvolo Riddle stares up at him from the pensive, not a vision of the past but a mind pressing against the edge of the spell. Dumbledore feels the echo of it in his skull. Cold, curious, a fragment that thinks. This is that story. He pulls back at once, severing the connection. The light collapses. The diary sits, inert, but he is breathing as if he has run a race. A soul, he thinks. A torn piece of soul. The word Horcrux, half buried under decades of deliberate forgetting, claws its way back into his conscious mind. He had suspected Voldemort might have made one. He had never let himself imagine he had hidden it under the school. He thinks of the basilisk's corpse cooling in the dark. A venom that can burn through anything, even the protections around a soul fragment. In another story, a boy might have driven a fang through this diary and ended this piece of Voldemort forever. But Harry is dead, and the fang was never raised, and the Horcrux remains perfect and patient. Now he has a choice. Destroy it blind and risk a magical backlash in the heart of Hogwarts, or leave it intact, a warhead under the nursery, while he studies what it is and how to unmake it safely. The grief of the castle presses in on him, the Weasleys' screams still echoing in his memory, Neville's wide, terrified eyes. The war is not over. The prophecy still hangs over them and twisting. He cannot risk an explosion he does not understand. So he does the more terrifying thing. He hides it. Deep beneath the office, beyond even the room of requirement, Dumbledore folds a pocket of space into the castle's bones. Wards scream soundlessly as he layers them. Anti-summoning, anti-possession, anti-disapparition, spells that would turn most minds to ash if they tried to force their way through. The diary rests on a plinth of cold stone, alone in the dark. He will research Horcruxes in secret while the world mourns the boy who lived. He will turn back to Neville, to Sirius, to Remus, and pretend he does not feel the ink-black weight beneath his feet. As he seals the last ward, the leather cover twitches. The next child who will open the wrong, the next child who will open the wrong door. The diary is not done with Hogwarts, and it is already imagining who will bleed for it next. Year 3. Without Harry, a haunted Hogwarts and a new defense professor. By the time the next September rolls around, the chamber is closed, but it is never silent. First years step off the boats and stare up at a castle that feels heavier than the stories promised. There in the Great Hall, between the banners and the floating candles, hangs a new portrait, Harry Potter at 11, laughing at something beyond the frame. His eyes follow them when they sit. His name is carved in gold beneath the canvas, the dates brutally short. The boy who lived. The boy who died under the school they are about to trust. This is that story. Near the second-floor girls' bathroom, the stone is lighter where magic has scraped away blood and rubble. Beside the wall, a polished brass plaque gleams. In memory of Harry James Potter, who gave his life to save a fellow student, June 1993. Students slow when they pass. Some reach out, fingers hovering over the engraved name, but not quite touching. Others whisper, "Is this where he went down? Is this where the spell hit?" The questions cut through the grief like a knife. On the train, parents had murmured warnings. Don't wander. Don't trust the walls. Hogwarts is still Hogwarts, but the war feels closer now, even for children. Into this haunted castle walks Remus Lupin. He arrives pale from the journey, threadbare case in hand, the new defense against the dark arts professor, with tired eyes that have already buried James and Lily. He had heard the news about Harry in a single shattering sentence over a crackling flu. 12 years old. Basilisk venom. Too late for Phoenix tears. Now, as he looks up at the portrait in the Great Hall, the reality lands in his chest. James's messy hair. Lily's eyes. Frozen in paint. What if I'd come sooner? What if I'd been here? Dumbledore's welcome is warm, but Remus hears the absence in every cheer. He takes his place at the staff table, gaze sweeping the hall like a defense professor cataloguing threats. Students flinch at sudden noises. Older years watch the doors, wands half drawn when the torches flicker. Parents have written letters demanding safety reports and ward audits. Remus reads them in the staff room, jaw tight, quietly assessing a school that failed his best friend's child. Classes feel different now. Every lesson on jinxes and countercurses lands heavier. When Remus demonstrates a shield charm, no one giggles at the wand movement. They stare, hungry, as if this spell might be the one that keeps them from ending up on a plaque. Ginny Weasley sits near the front. Smaller than she should be. Quieter. Remus mentions possession in theory. Her answers are sharp, precise, as if she's afraid of what will happen if she gets anything wrong. She does not speak in class unless called on. When Remus mentions possession in theory, her quill stills. Her eyes go distant. He files it away. Neville Longbottom, once the boy who dropped everything, now arrives early, wand already out, posture straighter. Augusta has drilled him all summer on basic hexes and shield work. Remus can see it in the way Neville plants his feet, in the stubborn set of his jaw when a spell falters. What if this is the child the prophecy meant all along? The thought hovers, unspoken, as Neville tries again and again until the charm finally flares. Ron Weasley is thinner, eyes shadowed. He throws himself into arguments about ministry policy with a fierceness that startles even McGonagall. Ron's essays on security, on oversight, on how the school should have responded faster, come in long, angry paragraphs. Hermione Granger, sitting beside him, has gone the other way, quieter, colder, drowning herself in books. She reads ahead 3 years in defense, cross-referencing curses and counter-curses until her ink-stained fingers tremble. Activism and study, twin reactions to the same wound. At night, Hogwarts breathes. The Great Hall empties. The portrait of Harry dozes, then wakes when footsteps echo. In his office, Remus Lupin sits alone. The room smells of tea, parchment, and the faint iron tang of old scars. On his desk lies a battered photograph, edges frayed from being thumbed too often. 4 boys in Gryffindor robes shove each other and laugh. James, Sirius, Peter, Remus. In the centre, cradled in James's arms, a baby with wild black hair reaches for the camera, mouth open in a delighted scream. Remus traces that tiny face with one finger. The night everything changed, he whispers to the empty room. Godric's Hollow, the war, the prophecy, every choice that followed. I'm too late for you, James. Too late for Lily. Too late for Harry. The words hang there, heavy. He closes his eyes, hearing again the crackle of the flue, Molly Weasley's broken voice, the way the world seemed to tilt when he realised the boy who lived was dead and the diary that killed him was never found. But maybe, he says finally, voice raw, I'm not too late for them. He looks out at the castle, the dormitories full of restless children, the corridors that still remember screams, the hidden chamber where a piece of Tom Riddle is waiting and watching, and makes a quiet, feral choice. If Hogwarts is going to be a battlefield, then he will make sure its children are soldiers who survive. What if one broken werewolf decides that this time the war will not eat them alive? Outside, the castle shifts in its sleep. Deep below, the diary listens. Sirius Black's escape, not to reunite, but to avenge. Sirius Black doesn't notice the cold anymore. Azkaban is endless stone and screaming wind and the slow rot of memory. Days smear together. Names blur. James, Lily, Peter, Harry, all dead, his mind whispers, because that's the story the Dementors press against his skull. Then, years too late, a scrap of newspaper slides through the bars. Boy who lived dies at Hogwarts. Those words cut through the grief like a knife. He stares. The ink swims. The profit article is clipped, damp, half torn, but the headline is clear and under it, a moving photograph of a much smaller boy than he expected. Glasses askew, smiling shyly at the camera. Underneath, a single word that makes Sirius's stomach lurch. Memorial. Harry is dead. Not hidden, not misplaced by Dumbledore's grand design. Not waiting in some muggle prison of a house. Dead. For a moment there is only silence in his head. No howling. No accusations. Just the night everything changed, replaying itself with a new, unbearable ending. James laughing. Lily rolling her eyes. Sirius swearing he'd die before he let anything touch their son. He didn't die. Harry did. The Dementors surge closer, sensing the spike of grief. They try to drag him under, back into the swamp of guilt and madness. But something new catches in his chest. Not the wild, broken laughter that landed him here. Something harder, sharper. Purpose. If Harry died at Hogwarts, then someone failed him. Someone lied. Someone let the war reach a 12-year-old boy under Albus Dumbledore's nose. What if that someone is the same rat who blew apart a street and 12 muggles and walked away on 3 paws? Weeks later, months maybe, another prophet. Different headline. Different photograph. A plump, red-haired family in Egypt, all grins and freckles. And there, on the youngest boy's shoulder, is a grey rat with a missing toe. Peter. In the original timeline, that image is a lifeline, a promise that Harry is out there to be protected. Here, it's something else. It's a verdict. Sirius doesn't think, he chooses. He will not let James's son die for nothing. He will not let the world remember the wrong villain and the wrong hero. He will not let Peter Pettigrew hide behind school children while Harry lies in the ground. So he stops eating, stops reacting. Lets the Dementors believe they've won, even as he clings to one thought that keeps him sane. Harry is dead, but Peter is not. When he slips through the bars in dog form, the escape is not a mad dash toward a godson waiting in a castle. It is a jailbreak for a war he refuses to let end on a lie. He swims through the freezing sea with his lungs burning, claws tearing at the water. He runs half wild across the countryside, ribs showing, paws bleeding, every breath a promise. He is not going to a child. He is hunting a traitor. Somewhere else, Remus Lupin packs a worn suitcase with shaking hands. Dumbledore's owl has already come and gone. Harry Potter is dead. A basilisk in the depths of the school. A diary no one understands. A girl named Ginny Weasley who survived when Harry did not. Remus's grief is quiet, contained, a spell pressed tight around a wound that will not close. Two marauders, one moving through official channels, answering Dumbledore's summons, one slipping through hedgerows and back alleys, following the scent of a rat and the rustle of the Daily Prophet, both drawn back to Hogwarts by the same dead boy at the centre of their world. Weeks later, Sirius stands at the edge of the Forbidden Forest in dog form, half shadow among the trees. Students pass on the lawn below, their voices low, their robes snapping in the wind. They slow as they near a white marble stone set beneath the sky. Harry James Potter, 31st of July, 1980 to 29th. May, 1993. The boy who lived. He watches them lay flowers, watches a small red-haired girl freeze in front of the stone, hands clenched, guilt written in every line of her body. Watches a tall red-haired boy hover near her, protective and broken. Watches a bushy-haired girl stand back, staring at the name as if daring the world to explain itself. Sirius's claws dig into the earth. In that moment, the choice crystallizes. This is not a rescue mission. It is an autopsy on a war that killed a child and lied about why. In his mind, he speaks to James and Lily because if he opens his mouth, he will scream. They think they buried your son and the truth. They're wrong. He lifts his head, eyes fixed on the castle, on the stone, on the children who should have grown up with Harry and instead walk past his grave. I swear, he whispers, voice rough with rust, someone will finally tell them what really happened. Someone will pay. Behind him, the forest stirs. Ahead, Hogwarts waits. This is that story. The Shrieking Shack without Harry. Confrontations rewired. The Shrieking Shack is breathing dust and memory when it happens. Ron crashes through the trapdoor first, leg twisted, fingers clawed around a squirming, treacherous rat. Hermione is right behind him, lungs burning, the tunnel's dirt still under her nails. They have already buried one friend. They are not losing another. Not to this castle. Not to this lie of a peaceful school. The door slams shut on its own. Bolts grind. The air turns cold. A man steps from the shadows. Wild hair, hollow cheeks, eyes that have stared at Azkaban walls for 12 dead years. Ron raises his wand with a hand that won't stop shaking. You tried to kill Harry, he spits. The name cuts through the grief like a knife. You got him killed. Sirius Black flinches like he's been hit with a spell. I never touched him, he rasps. Peter did. Peter killed Harry, just as surely as he killed James and Lily. His voice cracks on each name, a list of ghosts he's been rehearsing in his cell. Hermione doesn't lower her wand. Her heart is pounding so hard she can hear it over the wind rattling the boards. Harry's grave. The stone. The way Mrs. Weasley screamed when they brought his body up from the chamber. All of it is here with her. What if you're lying, she demands. What if you betrayed them, and because of you, Harry died alone under this school? The word alone hangs in the room, heavier than dust. Sirius's jaw trembles. He wasn't supposed to be alone, he whispers. He was supposed to be with me. The door opens again. Quietly this time. Remus Lupin steps inside, wand drawn, face pale in the half-light. He looks from Ron to Hermione to Sirius to the rat. For a heartbeat, the war and the years fall away. It's another night, another shack, another full moon. The night everything changed. Remus, Sirius says, and there is so much grief packed into 2 syllables it almost breaks the room. Lupin's gaze lands on Ron's hand, on Scabbers, on the missing toe. The choice hits him in a rush. Trust the boy who died or the system that locked his friend away. You've been sleeping in a dormitory, star, he says slowly. With Peter Pettigrew. Ron chokes. Hermione stares at the rat as if she can force the truth out by will alone. Scabbers isn't Peter, Ron protests, but the words come out thin. Sirius lunges, then stops himself, fingers digging into the rotten floor. He is. He framed me. He walked away from the crater and they called me the murderer. They buried James, Lily, and they buried Harry's future with a lie. Hermione's voice is raw. Then say it. If you didn't betray them, who did? Who made Harry a target before he could even talk? Lupin answers for him, the confession tearing free after 12 years of doubt. Peter was the secret keeper. Silence slams down, louder than any screamed accusation. The story they've been told, about a mad traitor, a reckless godfather, a boy who lived and then died, is suddenly wrong. This isn't about saving Harry's trust anymore. He's beyond that. This is about reclaiming his story from the lie that killed him. Ron's grip tightens on the rat. Hermione's wand doesn't waver, because if Peter Pettigrew is alive in Ron's hands, what else from that Halloween is still unfinished? And what will it cost to drag the rest of the truth into the light? Truth for the dead, Sirius, Remus, and the choice to go public. The shack is suddenly too small for the war that just walked into it. Peter trembling on the floor, Ron's knuckles white around his tail, Hermione's wand pressed to his throat, Sirius and Remus standing over all of them, breathing hard as if the air itself has turned to ash. "Kill him!" Sirius snarls. One word, but it carries 12 years of Azkaban, 12 years of grief that never had a target. His wand hand shakes, not from fear, from the animal urge to end this with a single spell. Remus stares at Peter, at the man who blew up a street and framed his friend, at the traitor who left Harry an orphan and then let him die under that same lie. His voice, when it comes, is quiet. Too quiet. "If we kill him," Remus says, "Harry stays dead under that lie forever." That cuts through the grief like a knife. The room stills. Even the shack's usual creaks fall into silence as if the building itself is listening. Sirius whips toward him. "He murdered James. Lily. He might as well have held the basilisk's fangs himself. Harry is dead because of him." His voice cracks on Harry's name, the way it did the night everything changed. "I will not let him breathe another minute." "You will," Remus answers, and now the quiet is dangerous. Because Harry died thinking his godfather was a traitor. Because the whole world thinks that. If you kill Peter in this room, that story never changes. You stay the villain. Peter stays the martyr. And Harry's memory stays twisted around a ministry lie. What if this is the last choice they ever make for Harry? Not to save him. To honour him. Sirius can feel Padfoot pacing inside his ribs, claws scraping, jaws ready. Rip the rat apart. Tear him limb from limb. End the war with blood. But the man who held a baby in Godric's Hollow, who promised James he'd be the best godfather in the world, is still in there too. He sees Ginny's white face in the chamber, Ron screaming Harry's name, Hermione's shoulders shaking when she thought he couldn't see, the children Harry left behind. Hermione moves first. "If Harry died saving Ginny," she says, and her voice is raw but steady, "then we owe him justice. Not another secret murder in the dark. We drag Peter into the light. We make them see." Ron swallows hard. Harry always wanted the truth. He hated lies. If we just finish him, we're no better than what they did to you. His grip tightens on Scabbers. For once, he doesn't flinch from the word dead. He deserves a real story. Pattern interrupt. It would be so easy to end this here. One flash of green. One more unmarked grave in a war built on them. Sirius's wand stays raised for a heartbeat too long. 2. 3. Then his arm shudders and he forces it down, every muscle protesting. "Fine," he spits. "We take him to the castle, to Dumbledore, to the ministry. We drag every coward who signed those papers into the light with him." His eyes burn, because Harry Potter will not be remembered as the godson of a traitor. Remus nods once. Ron and Hermione tighten their hold. The choice is made. This is that story. The march back to the castle will decide who actually owns the past, and who gets to shape what comes next. Public reckoning, the trial that never happened in canon. The march back to the castle becomes a march into history. The doors of the Wizengamot chamber stand open. Packed tiers, whispering witches and wizards in plum robes, quills hovering over parchment as reporters lean forward, hungry. This is not a quiet cover-up in a back office. This is the war for the story of the last 12 years, dragged into the light. Ron sits between his parents, shoulders rigid, freckles stark against skin that has not really warmed since the chamber. Hermione is on his other side. Her hands are clenched so tight around a folded handkerchief that her knuckles shine white. They are not children today. They are witnesses. They are what if made flesh. "Bring in the accused," the chief witch calls. Peter Pettigrew shuffles in, shackled, small. His watery eyes flicker to the Weasley box and find Ron. Ron doesn't flinch. He just stared at the man who slept in his room for a year, the man who watched Harry die and ran. On the other side of the chamber, Sirius stands, gaunt but unbound. No Dementors. No chains. Just the weight of a decade in Azkaban and the echo of a boy's last breath in an underground tunnel. The silence when Harry's heart stopped still lives in his ears. It cut through the grief like a knife. It still does. Fudge shifts in his high seat, robes too bright, face too pale. This was supposed to be simple. Black the traitor. Pettigrew the dead hero. A neat, dead story. Dumbledore rises first. His voice is soft, but it carries. 12 years ago, Sirius Black was imprisoned without trial. That was a catastrophic failure of justice. My failure, among others. The words land heavy. Had we sought the truth then, perhaps the chain of events that led to Harry Potter's death would never have begun. A murmur ripples through the gallery. Molly Weasley's hand flies to her mouth. Arthur stares at Dumbledore as if seeing him for the first time. Evidence, then. Not rumour. Not fear. Amelia Bones steps forward, wand precise. Prior incantato. Peter's wand screams smoke. Images spool out into the air. A street exploding. A flash of green. A rat's tail vanishing into shadow. The crowd recoils as the illusion of a dozen dead muggles hangs above them, framed by Pettigrew's own magic. Revelio animeus. The spell strikes him. Bones doesn't even blink as Peter's body twists, shrinks, snaps into the shape of a grey rat, then back again. Gasps break the chamber's composure. There is no room for ministry denial now. The boy who lived's godfather has been rotting in Azkaban while the real Animagus hid in a schoolboy's bed. Ron's testimony is halting but clear. Hermione's is surgical. Dates. Spells. The way Peter screamed when cornered. The way Sirius threw himself between them and the curse. Fudge dabs sweat from his brow. His narrative is dying in front of him, and there is no spell that can save it. Verdict. On all counts, the chief witch intones, Sirius Black is cleared. The word hangs there. Cleared. It doesn't bring Harry back. It doesn't touch the raw, open wound of a boy dead at 12, but it shifts something fundamental in the room, in the war. Peter Pettigrew, she continues, you are sentenced to life in Azkaban for murder, treason, and aiding Lord Voldemort. As the chains coil tighter around Peter, a new question threads through every whispering mind. If they were this wrong about Sirius Black, what else about the last war have they misunderstood? What protections were never real? What monsters were never monsters at all? And if the story of the past is collapsing, who will write the next one? A godfather without a godson. Sirius faces an empty future. He walks out to cheering. Sirius Black steps through the ministry's great bronze doors and into sunlight that feels wrong on his skin. The crowd surges, flashes pop, quills scratch. Innocent, the headlines will scream by morning. He doesn't care. He is staring past all of it, past the atrium fountain, past the auras forming a protective ring. There is no messy black hair in the front row. No thin boy with Lily's eyes, waiting to run at him. For 12 years, that image kept him alive. Harry at 11. Harry at 15. Harry at 17, flying a broom, complaining about homework, rolling his eyes at bad jokes. The fantasy was a spell he cast in the darkness of Azkaban, over and over, until it almost felt real. Now the truth cuts through the grief like a knife. Harry is dead. The silence inside that realization is louder than the crowd. Later, in a shadowed room at Grimmauld Place, Sirius stares at the fire until his vision blurs. Remus stands in the doorway, thinner than he remembers, scars deeper, eyes older. The war took everything from both of them. This new loss is something else. A second execution. I don't know who I am, Sirius says, voice raw. If I'm not Harry's guardian, what am I? Azkaban's mistake? A cleared name and nothing behind it? Remus crosses the room. He doesn't flinch at Sirius's anger, at the way every word sounds like it might break into a scream. You were never only his guardian, he answers. You are his godfather. That doesn't end because he's gone. He needed me, and I wasn't there. He still needs you, Remus says, and the firmness in his tone is the night everything changed for Sirius. Not the living boy, the truth of him. His death needs avenging, and there are other children who need protecting before this war eats them too. Ron, pale and hollow-eyed, refusing to go near the second-floor girls' bathroom. Hermione, who will not say the word chamber without shaking. Ginny, waking up screaming from dreams of a diary that talks back. What if Harry's godfather chose to disappear into his own grief and left them to drown in theirs? This is that story, the one where he doesn't. Sirius starts showing up, not as a replacement, never that, but as a constant presence. He drags Ron out to fly, not to forget Harry, but to remember that flying used to mean joy. He sits with Hermione in the library, arguing about curses and laws, feeding the fierce, bright anger that refuses to let Hogwarts stay unsafe. He learns Ginny's tells, the way her hands twist when she thinks about the diary, and teaches her shielding spells until her wrists ache and her eyes burn. And when Neville stammers through a question about dueling, Sirius sees it, the quiet, stubborn courage Dumbledore once whispered about. A different boy who might stand in the path of the next killing curse. One evening, when the sky over Godric's Hollow is the colour of old parchment, Sirius walks the narrow path to Harry's grave for the first time. The headstone is simple: name, dates, beloved son. The words feel wrong, incomplete. He sits down in the grass. We were supposed to prank Snape together, he tells the stone. Properly, not schoolboy nonsense, adult artistry. His voice shakes, but he keeps talking. About Quidditch matches never played, motorbikes never ridden, holidays never taken. About a flat in London he'd imagined, with 2 bedrooms, one for him, one for the boy who would never sleep there. I was going to teach you to be an animagus, he whispers. We were going to run under the full moon with Remus, the marauders back again. The wind moves through the trees. The graveyard holds its breath. If Voldemort is coming back, Sirius says at last, palm flat against cold stone, then this time we don't throw children at him and call it destiny. This time the marauders don't leave the next generation to fight alone. It isn't just a vow to Harry, it's a choice, hard and deliberate, in a story that has already stolen too much. Behind him, footsteps crunch on gravel. Remus. And, a moment later, lighter, hesitant steps. Ron, Hermione, Ginny, and Neville drawn here by their own ghosts. Sirius stands, wipes his eyes, and turns toward them. If the boy who lived is gone, then what if the answer was never one boy at all? Neville's training begins. From forgetful boy to reluctant. Heir Neville. Longbottom doesn't sleep much after the funeral. Morning comes cold and grey over Longbottom Manor. The house is too big, too full of portraits that stared down at him the night everything changed. At 6 sharp, Augusta Longbottom raps her cane against his bedroom door. Once, twice, no third time. Up, robes, wand. Her voice cuts through the grief like a knife. On the back lawn, the grass is wet and the air bites. Neville's hands shake as he raises his wand. Augusta stands opposite him, hat pinned, spine straight, eyes hard and wet at the edges. Again, she says after his shield charm fizzles, you will not be the boy who almost mattered, Neville. This family has already paid in blood. You will not go to war unprepared. Spells, counterspells, footwork drills until his legs burn. She corrects his grip, snaps at his hesitation, reminds him, quietly, fiercely, what was done to his parents, what was done to Harry. Every missed spell is another dead friend in her mind, in his. By breakfast, his robes are scorched, his porridge goes untouched. At Hogwarts, Dumbledore folds the same decision into softer words. In his office, Fawkes watches, head tilted. The silence hums with unasked questions. Neville, Dumbledore says, Professor Lupin has agreed to provide you with advanced study. Defense, in particular. I think you will find him an excellent teacher. Advanced study. Not remedial. Not pity. Neville clings to the phrase like a spell. Remus meets him in an empty classroom that smells of dust and old chalk. His smile is tired but real. We'll start with what you already know, Remus says gently, and then push past it. Fair? Neville nods, throat tight. He doesn't want this. Not this way. Not because Harry is dead in a chamber beneath their feet, But what if walking away means Harry died for nothing? What if he fails Harry and his parents and everyone who stared at him at the funeral with that terrible, measuring look? Remus tests him, disarming charms, stunning spells, shield after shield until Neville's arm aches. He doesn't shout when Neville falters. He explains, demonstrates, then quietly makes him do it again. Courage isn't loud here. It's staying when every part of him wants to run. Weeks later, Sirius arrives into the equation like a disrupted spell. Grimmauld Place has not tamed him. Grief has sharpened him. "You're too stiff," Sirius says during a clandestine lesson in a disused corridor. "Your Gran's right about discipline. She's wrong about predictability. War doesn't wait for you to recite the textbook." He shows Neville how to move, how to use cover, how to cast on the roll and fire from his knees, how to feint high and hit low. The Marauder way of fighting, reckless, improvisational, built on trust that you will make the impossible choice in the moment and somehow survive it. Remus sighs, but he doesn't stop it. Augusta would scream if she saw. Neville learns. One evening they push him too far. 3 dummies, hexes flying, Sirius barking orders, Remus throwing surprise curses from the side. Neville's head rings, his heart hammers. "Last one," Sirius shouts. "Protego Maxima now." Neville doesn't think. He plants his feet, remembers Augusta's stance, Remus's focus, Sirius's wild grin. The spell tears out of him, raw and desperate. A shimmering dome erupts, solid and bright. Curses slam into it and die. For a long second, there is only silence. Neville stares at the shield, chest heaving. He did that. He actually did that. For the first time, the weight on his shoulders feels heavy, but not impossible. If he can do this, what else might he be able to do when the real war comes knocking? Ginny's obsession with dark magic, studying the enemy from within. Neville will be the shield, but shields don't stop everything. Some wounds cut through the grief like a knife and never really close. Down in the hospital wing, Ginny Weasley lies awake long after the lamps are dimmed. The night everything changed still plays behind her eyes. The chamber, the basilisk, Harry's body cooling on the stone. She remembers the diary on the floor, intact, not stabbed, not dead, so she makes a choice. By September of her 3rd year, Madame Pince has a new problem. Books on possession, cursed objects, obscure mind magic start vanishing from the restricted section, only to return hours later with their pages dog-eared and margins smudged from someone gripping too hard. The titles are wrong for a 13-year-old. Malevolent artifacts of the late medieval period. On the fragmentation of the self. Bindings of will and memory. Ginny signs them out under safe-sounding covers, hides them in her bag under Transfiguration essays, and reads until the words blur. What did he do to me? The question stalks her. It sits at the edge of every page. Tom Riddle's voice had been silk and reason and comfort. He had listened when no one else did. He had told her stories. He had asked for secrets. And then she woke up with rooster blood on her hands. One rainy evening, she climbs the spiral staircase to the headmaster's office, fingers cold on the stone. Dumbledore watches her over his half-moon spectacles, Fawkes asleep, feathers dim in the corner. "Professor," Ginny says, throat tight, "what if a piece of someone could live in an object? Not a ghost. Something that can think, lie, take you over." The silence that follows is heavy. Dumbledore's eyes are too sharp, too knowing. He answers carefully, words measured like a spell. There is magic, he admits, that binds fragments of soul to things. It is foul, forbidden, older than the ministry itself. He does not say the word Horcrux. He does not tell her that he suspects Voldemort used it. He tells her instead that none of this was her fault. She doesn't believe him. Later, in a quiet corner of the library, she repeats the question to Remus Lupin when he visits as a guest lecturer, framing it as research for an essay. His reaction is smaller but sharper, a flinch in the eyes, a pause too long. Again, that same careful half-truth. Again, the sense that the adults are standing on the edge of a story they refuse to name. So Ginny starts naming things herself. She finds Hermione there, already buried in dark arts theory, tracking patterns in Voldemort's attacks, his choices, his obsession with certain families. Together, they spread books across the table, parchment covered in arrows and dates. Ginny adds something Hermione doesn't have: memory. The exact cadence of Tom's persuasion. The way he isolated her, then offered to fix the loneliness he created. "He'll do this to others," Ginny says, jaw clenched. "He'll tell them what they're most afraid is true, then offer them the only way out." She can predict the next move because she's already played that game and lost. Weeks later, deep in the stacks, a pattern interrupt in her own war. A thin, dust-choked volume wedged sideways behind safer texts. Rituals of severance and survival. The ink is faded, the Latin dense, but one passage makes her stomach drop. Magic to split the soul, to anchor it, to survive death. She stares at the words until they swim. What possessed her wasn't just a memory. It was a man refusing to stay dead. And somewhere in the walls of Hogwarts, his first weapon is still hidden, still waiting. 4th year. Reforged. The Triwizard Tournament, without Harry. The diary sleeps. The basilisk's skull gathers dust. Harry is dead, and the war has gone quiet in all the wrong ways. 2 years later, the banners go up. The Ministry needs a distraction. After the chamber scandal, after the inquiry into why a 12-year-old boy died under a school, after Sirius Black is cleared and the Prophet runs a week of headlines about wrongful imprisonment and Azkaban abuse, confidence in authority is bleeding out. Cornelius Fudge makes a choice. He doesn't reform. He performs. Bring back the Triwizard Tournament. Put Hogwarts on the front page for glory, not grief. So the Beaubaton carriage descends through grey Scottish clouds. The Durmstrang ship rises from the lake. Students press to the windows, breath fogging the glass. Once they would have screamed for the boy who lived. Now they just stare. There is no obvious champion in the public imagination anymore. No golden child the cameras can find in a crowd. Harry's absence cuts through the grief like a knife every time a reporter says Hogwarts hero and has no one to point at. Cedric Diggory feels it most. Tall, kind, handsome, he becomes the Ministry's answer to an unspoken question. What if Hogwarts can still produce someone worth believing in? Hufflepuff colours swell in the stands. The cheers for Cedric are loud, but there's a hollowness under them. A quieter, haunted school pride that remembers a boy who never got to be 14. Ron stands beside Hermione in the Great Hall as Dumbledore explains the Goblet of Fire. His hands are fists in his pockets. Hermione counts the enchanted candles, forcing herself not to picture Harry under stone. Ginny listens from the end of the Gryffindor table, shoulders tight, the words eternal glory scraping against the memory of wet rock and blood. And at the staff table, Mad-Eye Moody drains his flask and watches them all. Neville is the first to notice the patterns. The way Moody's magical eye lingers on him in herbology. The offhand comment about surviving worse than Death Eaters that makes Professor Sprout flinch. What if this isn't just an eccentric aura with scars, but something sharper, hungrier underneath? Hermione clocks different details. The precision with which he teaches unforgivable curses. The way his lessons keep circling back to one theme: how to break a person and leave them technically alive. Without Harry pulling her into midnight investigations, her suspicion doesn't explode. It seeps. She trades looks with Neville. Ginny watches too, jaw clenched, but no one is the centre of this pattern. So the doubt spreads slowly, thin as smoke. Far away in a ruined manor house, Voldemort is done waiting. He still needs a body. He still needs blood. The prophecy that once pointed at Harry Potter has another edge, another boy born at the end of July. Neville Longbottom. Voldemort's rage has cooled into calculation. Why bind himself to one child's blood when he can design a ritual that draws on any who have defied him, any whose families fought in the First War? This is that story. A different resurrection. A different trap. Halloween night, the goblet burns blue. Names fly out in sparks. Victor Crumb, Fleur Delacour, Cedric Diggory. The hall settles. Then the flames flare red. A fourth scrap of parchment spits into Dumbledore's hand. Not Harry Potter. Neville Longbottom. The silence is absolute, and somewhere in the dark, a dead man's plan locks into place around a boy who never asked to be chosen. Who takes Harry's place in the graveyard? A dark reimagining Neville's name is still echoing in the hall when the real war quietly adjusts its aim. Dumbledore's eyes flash, calculating. In his office, the cracked silver instruments whir faster, reacting to a choice the world doesn't know has been made. Because what if the prophecy never really died with Harry in the chamber? What if it simply shifted? Voldemort has already decided. In a rotting manor house, Nagini coils around a high-backed chair. Wormtail trembles beside a cauldron that will one day hold his master's new body. On the table, a scrap of enchanted parchment, charred at the edges, bearing only 2 words. Longbottom boy. Harry Potter is dead. The diary survived. The tether to Hogwarts and Ginny Weasley has given Voldemort everything he needs. Memories, layouts, weaknesses. But the prophecy he half heard still gnaws at him. A child born as the 7th month dies, to parents who defied him 3 times. If not Potter, then the other. Neville becomes, in Voldemort's mind, both backup and insurance. This is that story. The third task maze rises black and bristling against the June sky. Hedges tower, rustling with whispered spells. Torches flicker along the stadium, but inside the maze the light dies quickly. Neville stands at the entrance, wand sweaty in his hand, trying not to think about Harry's grave under the school, trying not to hear his grand's voice telling him to be brave, as if bravery ever brought the dead back. A whistle. He runs. Left. Then right. Sparks from his wand mark his path, trembling in the dark. A blast-ended Scroot screams somewhere ahead. A boggart flickers into his parents and he almost breaks. He keeps going. Because what if this is the only thing he's ever actually chosen for himself? Then he sees it. The cup, gleaming in a small, clear circle of grass, almost gentle in the middle of so much fear. Neville stumbles toward it, chest heaving. No dragons, no dementors, just a trophy. He grabs the handle. The world rips away. Cold. Wet grass. The sickly, sweet smell of decay. Tombstones crowd around him, names he doesn't recognize carved in stone that feels too close. A churchyard angel stares down, wings eroded. The cup clatters away, dead metal now. "Welcome, Neville Longbottom," a voice hisses from the shadows. Robe hems whisper over gravel. Wormtail shuffles into view, carrying something small and shriveled, a thing that should not be alive. A huge cauldron squats in the center of the graveyard, steam curling out in pale threads. Neville's wand hand shakes. This isn't part of the tournament. On the contrary, Voldemort's high, thin voice answers from that obscene bundle. You are the main event. The ritual begins. Bone of the father, flesh of the servant, blood of the enemy. Wormtail's knife flashes. Neville screams as it bites into his arm, hot and bright. His blood steams as it hits the potion, turning it a terrible, gleaming red. The prophecy's weight slams into him with every heartbeat. Enemy, they mean him. Voldemort speaks over the crackle of magic, savouring every word. Harry Potter died in your school, he says softly. Under your headmaster's nose. The boy who lived, didn't. The wizarding world built its hope on a child, and he rots beneath your feet. Now they have nothing. No saviour. No shield. Only you. The potion erupts. A tall, skeletal figure rises, pale as moonlight, eyes burning scarlet. Voldemort flexes his new hands, laughs, and touches his wand to the sky. The dark mark blooms above the graveyard, green and merciless. When Neville crashes back onto the Hogwarts pitch, clutching his bleeding arm, his story spills out in broken gasps. A graveyard. Voldemort. The mark. The crowd stares. The ministry officials trade tight, disbelieving looks. Dumbledore's face goes very still, and high above them all, the fading skull in the clouds marks the night everything changed, but almost no one is ready to admit it. Not yet. Dumbledore's army without its namesake, a different resistance. Form's Umbridge arrives in a cloud of pink and poison. She smiles through Neville's testimony, through the prophet's headlines, through the whispered, Voldemort is back, and the raw memory of a boy who died in the bowels of this castle. The ministry calls Harry's death a tragic accident, a failure of school safety, not a warning, not the first casualty of a new war. What if grief itself became a political tool? Cornelius Fudge leans on it. The boy who lived is dead, he reminds the Wizengamot, and still the sky has not fallen. Neville's story is dismissed as trauma. Ginny's nightmares are hysteria. The official line is simple. Voldemort died years ago. Anything else is panic. In the common room, that lie cuts through the grief like a knife. Hermione stares at the fire until her eyes burn. Harry's empty chair is a presence. Neville's shaking hands are another. When she finally speaks, her voice is low but steady. They didn't believe Harry when he said something was wrong with the chamber. They didn't stop it. He died because adults underestimated Voldemort. They're doing it again. Ron flinches. Ginny's fingers curl around her knees. No one argues. This is that story. The one where Hermione Granger stops waiting for permission. What if, she says, we stop trusting them to protect us? What if we learn to do it ourselves? The words hang in the silence, heavier than any spell. The first meeting in the Hogshead smells of goats and spilled ale. Faces blur through the smoke. Gryffindor, Hufflepuff, Ravenclaw. Students who remember a 12-year-old boy carried out of the chamber, dead and limp, his glasses cracked. Hermione explains the plan. A secret defense group. Real magic. Real preparation. We owe him that much, she says. No more children die because adults are afraid of the truth. They don't call it Dumbledore's army because Harry once led them. They call it that because Dumbledore is being pushed out, Umbridge is being shoved in, and the Ministry is at war with reality. But inside the group, the ethos shifts. It isn't Harry's army. It's a vow. Ginny steps forward first when they need someone to demonstrate. Her voice doesn't shake. I remember what it felt like, she says quietly, when something else was in my head. I'm not being powerless again. She hurls a stunning spell that cracks a practice dummy against the wall. Neville takes the next turn. His dueling stance is imperfect, but there is a graveyard in his eyes now, a dark mark burned into his memory. He drills shield charms until his arms ache, then starts again. Ron, jaw clenched, runs the room through basic formations Sirius taught him over a firelit summer, turning Quidditch strategy into battle movement. They shouldn't know what they know. But they do. On certain nights, a battered mirror in the room of requirement flares faintly. Sirius's voice, distorted and soft, filters through as he and Remus feed them tactics, curse-breaking tricks, the theory behind the Patronus. You train, Sirius says, because no one is coming in time. You are it. Spells flash, disarms, shields, silent casting. They fall, they get back up. They learn to move as one. The room shifts around their need. Dummies, targets, a mock graveyard where Neville practices standing his ground. By the far wall, someone takes a knife and carves 3 words into ancient stone. Harry James Potter. No dates, no title, just a name. Every meeting ends the same way. Wands down, breath harsh, eyes drawn, one by one to that rough carving. They don't speak about it. They don't have to. The boy who lived is gone. But in this hidden room, his absence trains an army, and soon the war will notice. Snape's guilt and obsession, protecting Lily's legacy. Without Harry, Snape is the one who never looks at the carving. Everyone else's eyes are dragged to those 3 hacked-out words on the wall. Harry James Potter. Snape walks past them as if they're blank stone, but the first time he saw them, something in him broke so cleanly it felt almost gentle. Harry was 12 when he died. 12 when the basilisk's venom stopped his heart on the cold floor of the chamber. 12 when the one promise that had justified Severus Snape's entire life as a spy turned to ash. In Dumbledore's office, the night everything changed. There was no shouting. No thrown vials, just silence, heavy and sour. Snape stood in front of the desk, robes dripping from the rain outside, and stared at a point just over Fawkes's head. I warned you, he said at last. His voice didn't rise. That made it worse. You put him under your protection. Under mine. And he is dead. Dumbledore's fingers tightened around the broken halves of a phoenix feather quill. I failed him, he whispered. We both did. That admission cut through the grief like a knife, because it was true. Snape had sworn to keep Lily's son alive, and now Lily's son lay in the hospital wing, still and cold, a white sheet drawn over messy black hair. What if that was all his life had been? A long, ugly prelude to this one final failure. Something in him hardened around the answer. If he could not protect the boy, he could still destroy the man who had marked him. From that night, Snape's work as a double agent changed. He stopped hedging. In Death Eater meetings, his suggestions grew sharper, more lethal, always nudging Voldemort's followers toward plans that would fail, raids that would meet prepared auras, accidents that culled the most sadistic. He became ruthless with them in a way that startled even Dumbledore, and reckless. Because without Lily's son as his reason to live, the edge between courage and suicide blurred. He volunteered for every dangerous assignment. He walked into Voldemort's presence with less care for how deeply the Dark Lord dug into his mind. Once he pushed back too hard, and his left forearm screamed for days, the dark mark blistered and black. Dumbledore saw the trajectory. He made a different choice. "If you will not live for yourself," the old man said quietly, "live for them." He didn't point toward the wall carving. He pointed toward the castle. Neville Longbottom, who now might be the prophecy's true hinge. Ginny Weasley, whose mind still carried the echo of Tom Riddle's possession, waking screaming with words she didn't remember saying. The growing cluster of students training in that hidden room, the DA that had turned Harry's absence into a weapon. "This war will still be fought through children," Dumbledore said. "Help me make sure they survive it." Snape hated the logic. He hated that it worked. Neville was the worst of it. In another story, Snape had resented him for almost being the chosen one, for the way one twist of fate had spared this fumbling boy and doomed Lily's child. Now, with Harry dead, that resentment didn't vanish. It shifted. Every time Neville entered his classroom, Snape saw two ghosts at once, the boy who lived by accident and the boy who died on purpose. His words stayed cruel, his standards brutal. But his detentions for Neville changed. Less pointless cruelty, more forced practice. Brewing antidotes, casting shields until his arms shook. "What if he breaks?" Minerva demanded once, cornering him in a corridor. "Then he breaks now," Snape snarled, "and not when the Dark Lord is in front of him." He never admitted the other truth, that some twisted, reluctant protectiveness had taken root. If fate had shoved this awkward boy into Harry's empty place, Snape would make sure he could stand there. Ginny he treated differently. Quieter. He alone, besides Dumbledore, understood what it meant to have Voldemort's voice in your head. When she flinched at sudden noise, when she stared too long at nothing, Snape's detentions for her involved occlumency drills disguised as lines and essays. He never explained. She never thanked him. Years later, on a raw November evening, Snape apparated to a small Muggle graveyard in Godric's Hollow. The war was grinding on. The diary still hidden. Children still dying. Lily's grave was simple. Her name, 2 dates, no title. "I couldn't save your son," he told the stone. The admission tasted worse than Veritaserum. "But I will not let him be the first of many." The wind moved through the trees. No phoenix song. No answer. "This is that story," he murmured, almost to himself. "The one where he dies, and I finish what he began." He laid his hand against the cold marble, as if swearing on a wand. Never again, Severus Snape vowed. He will not claim another child. The Ministry's slow collapse. Denial, panic, and power. Grabs by spring, Snape's vow is only one thread in a web that's starting to strain. Cornelius Fudge stands in front of a sea of candles for Harry Potter and lies through his teeth. "The boy who lived gave his life," he proclaims, voice echoing off the atrium's golden statues. His sacrifice ensured you-know-who's final defeat. There is no cause for panic. The crowd stares up at him. Mothers clutch photographs. Students in black armbands shift, restless. Somewhere near the back, Ginny Weasley flinches at the word sacrifice because she remembers cold stone, the diary's voice, and Harry's body going still. Fudge presses on. He has charts. He has crime statistics massaged into comfort. He has a new commemorative program. Harry's face on posters, on badges, on a ministry-approved Never Again campaign that somehow never mentions a basilisk, or a diary, or the way the castle screamed the night everything changed. Behind the podium, Dumbledore's expression is carved from ice. What if the war had ended here? What if Harry's death really had broken the prophecy and left Voldemort dead and done? That is the story Fudge needs. A neat ending. A dead child turned into a shield. So when Amos Diggory files a report about robed figures seen on a moor, when an Aura team chases rumours of a snake-faced man abroad, Fudge waves it away. Isolated incidents. Dark wizards, not Dark Lord. He tells the prophet that grief makes people see monsters in shadows. It works. For a while. Because the public fractures along a fault line that Harry himself never had to watch. On one side, those who listen to Ginny's halting haunted account of the chamber, who hear Dumbledore say carefully that a fragment of Voldemort's soul had been walking their corridors, who remember that the diary vanished from evidence before anyone saw it destroyed. On the other, people who need the myth. Harry the martyr. Harry the spell that ended the war. They cling to the idea that his choice in the chamber sealed everything because the alternative, that a 12-year-old died and nothing was fixed, cuts through the grief like a knife. Sirius Black does not stay quiet. He stands on the steps of the Ministry with Remus at his side, Azkaban's scars visible, voice raw. You locked me up without a trial. You ignored evidence. You ignored Peter. Now you're ignoring this. He holds up a copy of Ginny's sworn statement, the parchment shaking. How many children have to die before you admit you were wrong? Remus speaks more softly, but the words hit just as hard. He talks about systems, about how a government that could throw an innocent man into Azkaban can absolutely convince itself a dead boy solved its problems. He names laws, he names names. Their story spreads. Wireless interviews, underground pamphlets. A growing whisper at Hogwarts, if they lied about Sirius, what else are they lying about? Inside the Ministry, cracks widen. Kingsley Shacklebolt reads the chamber reports and does not look away. Tonks, fresh from training, listens to her old professor and quietly starts routing certain tips to Dumbledore instead of her supervisor. Even a few desk-bound bureaucrats, people who stamp forms and file memos, begin slipping information to the headmaster's allies. They have children at Hogwarts. They have seen the memorial wall. They know denial is a spell that will break. One morning, Fudge arrives to work flanked by photographers. He never makes it to the doors. Across the polished stone of the Ministry's outer wall, in dripping, furious red, someone has spray-painted 7 words. Harry died, and you lied. Silence rolls through the atrium as workers stop and stare. A security wizard raises his wand to scour it clean, but a young witch in plain robes steps forward and blocks him without speaking. This is that story. The one where a generation looks at a government built on fear and convenience and says no. The paint will be gone within the hour. The crack it reveals will only widen. Order of the Phoenix 2.0. Built for children who already know war. They scrape the paint off the Ministry wall before midnight. They cannot scrape off what it revealed. Number 12. Grimmauld Place. The first New Order meeting since Harry died. The house feels different. Less mausoleum, more war room. Creature skulks in the shadows, muttering about blood traitors, but the kitchen is full. Sirius at the head of the table, shoulders squared, jaw locked. Remus to his right with parchment and a neat stack of notes, the quiet centre of the storm. McGonagall, rigid as a drawn wand. Snape, all folded arms and narrowed eyes. Arthur and Molly, Kingsley, Tonks, Mad-Eye. A handful of others who still remember the First War as the night everything changed. No one speaks at first. The silence is heavy, full of ghosts. Harry's name hangs there, unsaid, and everyone stares at the place he should be sitting. Sirius breaks first. We failed him. No theatrics, no barked laugh, just words that cut through the grief like a knife. Molly flinches. Sirius? No. Remus's voice is soft, but it stops her. He's right. He looks older than his years, scarred hands folded together. We wrapped him in half-truths and called it protection. We told ourselves he was a child and then sent him into danger with less training than we give Auror recruits in their first month. McGonagall's mouth thins. We did not send him into the chamber. Didn't we? Sirius's gaze is flint. We sent him into second year with a cursed diary under his nose, a basilisk in the walls, and no idea what Tom Riddle really was. We left him guessing. Alone. That was a choice. The word hangs there. Choice. What if they had told him everything? What if the boy who lived hadn't had to improvise his way through a war? Snape's eyes flash. You propose we correct this by recruiting more children? Excellent. Perhaps we can issue them uniforms. Tonks leans forward, hair a dull, grieving brown. They're already recruited. The DA exists. They've been teaching each other spells while the Ministry pretends Voldemort is dead. Harry died at 12. Pretending they're safe doesn't make it true. Arthur's voice trembles. They are my children. And Harry was mine, Sirius fires back. The room goes still. I will not watch Neville or Ginny or Hermione walk blind into the same darkness because we are too afraid to look them in the eye and say, this is war. Remus pushes his notes into the centre of the table. Structured, ruthless. New strategy. The Order stops reacting. We stop waiting for attacks and then sending flowers. We dismantle Voldemort's infrastructure, money, creatures, sympathizers, artifacts. And we do it in partnership with the DA, not over their heads. McGonagall hesitates. You would formalize a student army? A student corps, Kingsley corrects quietly. Voluntary, trained, supervised, focused on defense, intelligence, and survival. They're already fighting, at least teach them how not to die. Molly's eyes shine with furious tears. They are 16. Harry was 12, Remus says, and the room flinches. How many more graves do we need before we admit our model is broken? Sirius draws a slow breath. There's another piece. Dumbledore thought Harry was the key because of that prophecy. But Voldemort didn't just make one mistake. He made 7. Snape's head snaps up. You're certain? Not a question. A dread. Remus nods. Horcruxes. The diary was one. We didn't destroy it. It's still out there, and Dumbledore believes there are more. If we want this war to end, we hunt them. The word lands with the weight of a spell. Hunt. McGonagall's voice is barely above a whisper. And how exactly do you propose we find something we barely understand? Sirius doesn't look away. We start with the only person who's survived one from the inside. Arthur goes white. Sirius, no. But Molly is already shaking her head, tears spilling. Ginny is healing. She still wakes up screaming. You cannot drag her back into that nightmare. What if the nightmare comes for her anyway? Tonks asks. No one answers. Remus meets Arthur's eyes, then Molly's. We don't drag her. We ask. We tell her the truth we denied Harry. And if she says no, we live with it. But if she says yes, he swallows. We will need her. The diary used her. She may remember more than she knows. The room fractures, raised voices, overlapping fears, old loyalties colliding with new realities. But beneath it runs a single, cold current. Harry is dead, and doing what they did before will only buy more funerals. At last, McGonagall stands. I will not sanction children as cannon fodder. Her eyes are steel. But I will not sanction ignorance either. If Miss Weasley is to decide, she deserves the truth. Sirius nods once. A grim, irreversible decision. Then it's settled. The Order hunts Horcruxes. And our next move... He looks toward the dark hallway as if he can already see the burrow in the distance. See a girl with red hair and a scar on her soul. Is to ask Ginny Weasley if she's ready to go back into Tom Riddle's shadow. No one breathes. Because everyone knows the real question isn't whether Ginny is ready. It's whether the war is ready for what she remembers. Hunting Horcruxes. Without Harry, Ginny steps into the chamber's shadow. The chamber is open and full of whispers. They gather in Dumbledore's office the night everything changed for the second time. Rain claws at the windows. Fawkes is silent. Sirius stands with his back to the fire, Remus beside him. McGonagall sits ramrod straight. Snape lurks in shadow. Ginny Weasley perches on the edge of a chair, hands clenched in her lap so tightly her knuckles are white. Dumbledore doesn't pace. He doesn't twinkle. He just stares at the scarred surface of his desk, then at the girl who survived when Harry didn't. There is something I have concealed, he says, and the words cut through the grief like a knife. About Tom Riddle. about how he did not truly die. Sirius's jaw tightens. You mean beyond the obvious? Snape's eyes flicker. He knows the theory. He's never heard the name. Horcruxes, Dumbledore says. Ginny flinches. Her hands start to shake. The word is new, but the shape of it is not. It feels like ink on her skin again. What if you told us this before? Sirius demands. Before Harry went into that chamber alone? Dumbledore takes the blow. He doesn't defend himself. I believed the diary destroyed. I was wrong. This is that story. He explains. Splitting the soul. Murder as a spell. Objects that refuse to die. As he speaks, Ginny's breathing goes shallow. She's back in the corridor. Back in the bathroom. Back in the chamber where Harry's body went still. Miss Weasley, Dumbledore says gently. Your experience with the diary may guide us, if you can bear it. She swallows, then nods. It talked, she says. Not just in words, in feelings. At first it felt safe, warm, someone listening when no one else did. Then it started twisting things. My brother's jokes, Mum's nagging, Harry's kindness. It told me they didn't really care. Her voice roughens. Every time I wrote, it felt stronger. I felt lighter, emptier. Sometimes I'd lose hours. I'd wake up with ink on my hands and soil on my shoes. It fed on me, and it loved that I trusted it. Remus leans forward. Could you feel where it was, when it was using you? Ginny nods slowly. Cold, right here. She presses a fist under her ribs. Like a piece of me had gone dead and something else was wearing it. Silence presses in. War, defined in one girl's shaking hands. Dumbledore's eyes harden. The diary is still beneath this school, in a vault I constructed around the chamber once it was sealed. Our first mission is to retrieve it, properly, with you there, Miss Weasley, if you choose. What if it takes her again? Sirius snaps. It won't. Ginny's voice is sudden, sharp. Everyone turns. It can't. It killed Harry. It doesn't get to have me too. Pattern interrupt. The smallest Weasley is the one making the choice. The descent is nothing like Harry's. No frantic chase, no phoenix song. Just Dumbledore, Sirius, Remus, Snape, McGonagall, and Ginny, moving through stone corridors that remember screams. The new wards around the chamber hum with layered spells. Containment, suppression, fire. The vault is a bubble of frozen air around a simple, battered book on a plinth. No blood, no ink, just a cracked spine and a name, Tom Marvolo Riddle. Ginny steps forward. Her wand is steady. Her hand is not. She reaches out, touches leather. Nothing. No rush of warmth. No whisper in her ear. The Horcrux is caged, and it knows it. I'm not opening you, she murmurs. You don't get my secrets again. Dumbledore circles the plinth, drawing a ring of shimmering liquid light. Basilisk venom, he says quietly. One of the few substances that can end such magic. We were fortunate the creature left us enough. He tips the vial. Venom splashes onto the diary. The reaction is instant. Pages writhe. The book screams without sound. A ghostly outline of Tom Riddle's face bulges from the cover, mouth open, eyes wild. Ginny doesn't look away. For a heartbeat, a whisper threads through the chamber. Ginny, she stares straight into the dying echo. Harry won, she says. You're just late to notice. The face collapses. The book splits, ink pouring out and burning away in the venom's touch. The first Horcrux dies in the dark under Hogwarts. Up above, the war doesn't feel it yet. But Dumbledore does. So does Snape. And Ginny, standing over the dead diary, understands something terrifying and electric. If this is how one piece of Voldemort dies, how many more pieces are waiting? And who will they ask to walk into that shadow next? Neville's crucible, facing Bellatrix and his parents' past. The mission begins with a whisper. St. Mungo's, midnight. The rumour that cuts through the grief like a knife. Death Eaters are moving, and Bellatrix Lestrange wants to finish what she started with the Longbottoms. Neville hears it in the kitchen at Grimmauld Place. Order members crowded around the table, maps and parchment. Sirius pacing, Remus staring at the wall as if he can already see the hospital corridors filling with screams. "Absolutely not," Augusta Longbottom says. "If I don't go now," he says, "when? When 1999? When 2000? When 2001? When 2002? When 2003? When 2004? When 2005? When 2006? When 2007? When 2008? When 2009? When 2010? When 2011? When 2012? When 2013? When 2014? When 2015? When 2016? When 2017? When 2018? When 2019? When 2020? When 2021? When 2022? When 2023? When 2024? When 2025? When 2026? When 2027? When 2028? When 2029? When 2030? When 2031? When 2032? When 2033? When 2034? When 2035? When 2036? When 2037? When 2038? When 2039? When 2040? When 2041? When 2042? When 2043? When 2044? When 2045? When 2046? When 2047? When 2048? When 2049? When 2050? When 2051? When 2052? When 2053? When 2054? When 2055? When 2056? When 2057? When 2058? When 2059? When 2060? When 2061? When 2062? When 2063? When 2064? When 2065? When 2066? When 2067? When 2068? When 2069? When 2070? When 2071? When 2072? When 2073? When 2074? When 2075? When 2056? When 2077? When 2038? When 2029? When 2080? When 2081? When 2082? When 2023? When... If I don't go now, he says. When? When she kills someone else's parents? When she comes here? His eyes flick to Sirius, to Remus, to the silent portraits of black ancestors who watched a different war. You keep saying, I have to be ready. This is how I get ready. What if this is the night everything changed for Neville Longbottom instead of Harry Potter? What if the spare boy steps into the space the dead hero left behind? Sirius's jaw works. Remus's hand tightens on the back of a chair. They know the prophecy. They know the other name it could have chosen. This is your choice, Remus says quietly. But if you come, you follow orders? Neville nods. It's not obedience. It's commitment. St. Mungo's is wrong at night. Too bright. Too quiet. The wards hum with healing magic, but beneath it there is another pulse, cold and waiting. They slip in under disillusionment. Sirius in front, Remus guarding the rear, Neville in the middle, wand slick in his hand. Every corridor smells of potions and fear. Then the first spell flies. Green light slices the air where Neville's head was a second before. Sirius tackles him behind a trolley, metal clanging, vials shattering. Order members explode into motion. The war comes roaring into the hospital. Bellatrix appears at the far end of the ward like something dragged up from a nightmare. Wild hair, mad eyes, laughter that doesn't sound human. Well, she purrs, deflecting a stunner with lazy grace. If it isn't the spare, little Neville, come to visit Mummy and Daddy. The words hit harder than any curse. Behind her, through the glass, Neville can see the closed door to his parents' ward. The place he brings sweets and stories to people who don't know his name. Something in him snaps. He stands. The fear is still there, but it's behind glass now. Contained. His wand doesn't tremble. Stupefy. The spell is clean, sharp, red light punching through her shield hard enough to stagger her. Her eyes widen. Oh, she whispers. The little plant has thorns. The duel becomes a storm. She taunts. He answers with spells that would have made his first-year self stare. Chained shields, silent disarms, a blasting curse that tears open the floor. Every time he falters, he sees his parents' empty eyes. Every time she laughs, he remembers Harry dead under Hogwarts. Ginny's grief, the diary on the floor. Sirius and Remus flank her, hemming her in, but they don't finish it. They trade a glance. Deliberate, calculated. Now, Neville, Sirius shouts. Your call? Kill her. End the screaming. End the story that started in his nursery. Or don't. Dumbledore's briefings flash through his mind. Horcrux. Fragments of soul. Bellatrix closer to Voldemort than anyone still walking free. Neville's hand steadies. Expelliarmus! Her wand rips free, spinning end over end. Petrificus totalis! Her body slams to the floor, rigid, eyes burning. He doesn't cast the deadlier spell sitting on his tongue. He chooses not to. Sirius is there in an instant, snapping on enchanted bindings. Remus seals her with layered wards. but it is Neville who stands over her, chest heaving, wand still raised. He's shaking, but he is not broken. For the first time, staring down at the woman who destroyed his family and failed, he feels something new settle in his bones. He is not just the boy who grew up in Harry Potter's shadow. He is casting one of his own, and the war has just acquired a different kind of leader. Snape's tightrope. Deeper into Voldemort's inner circle. Voldemort hears about Neville Longbottom before Snape can decide how to spin it. A boy in the Department of Mysteries. A prophecy sphere shattered. Bellatrix Lestrange dueling a child who should have been dead or cowering and losing. The report lands on the Dark Lord's desk like a curse. Neville, again. Snape kneels on the cold stone of the Riddle House drawing room, forehead bent, eyes on the hem of Voldemort's robes. He can feel the rage before he hears it. Magic presses down, a storm about to break. Twice, Voldemort whispers. Twice now, Longbottom stands where Potter should have stood. His voice is almost soft, and that softness is what makes the hairs rise on Snape's arms. What if the prophecy never truly left that bloodline at all? The words cut through the grief like a knife. Harry is dead. The boy who lived is a body in a grave. But the prophecy never said his name. It said a boy born as the 7th month dies. 2 boys. This is that story, Snape thinks, not without bitterness. The one where a dead child's shadow isn't enough. The war demands another. He chooses his next sentence with the care of a man diffusing a curse. My lord, Longbottom has improved, but he is no Potter. His dueling is crude, his leadership reactive, his confidence depends on others. Each word is a spell, crafted to soothe and misdirect. The so-called DA compensates for his weaknesses. Without them, he is merely adequate. Voldemort's red eyes narrow. And yet he defied Lestrange. He survives the Ministry's trap. He rallies children in my own school. He circles Snape slowly. Adequate boys do not do this. Snape's heart hammers. He cannot deny Neville completely. That would smell of fear, of concealment. But if Voldemort focuses too sharply, he will see the truth, that the DA has become an army, that Neville is learning to be the leader Harry never had time to become. So Snape threads the needle. He is dangerous only as part of a larger infection, my lord. Cut out the others, and the host will fail. The choice costs him. Voldemort begins to test him. More often, more cruelly. Errands that reek of Lily's grave. Bring me names, the Dark Lord hisses one night, breath cold against Snape's ear. Children who speak Longbottom's name with too much faith. Former Order sympathizers who shelter them. Make examples. Examples mean bodies. Ginny Weasley's name appears on a parchment, circled in lazy, amused handwriting. So does Neville's. Snape stares at the list in his quarters, the candlelight shaking with his hand. Ginny, who walks the corridors with eyes that have seen the chamber, and a boy dying to save her. Neville, who now dreams of snakes and prophecy, and doesn't know why. He cannot let another child die for Lily's sake. So when a Death Eater team moves to snatch Neville on his way back from herbology, the path they ambush is empty. A staircase has shifted early. A door they plan to seal refuses to close. A spell misfires, rebounding off a suddenly strengthened ward. Snape, hours earlier, one steady, had whispered counter-curses into the stone. The raid fails. Voldemort is displeased. Next comes Ginny. A poisoning, elegant and quiet, planned for a Hogsmeade weekend. The vial never reaches her table. It shatters in transit, its contents transfigured by an unknown hand into harmless ink. 2 failures, 1 spy. Voldemort's eyes on him grow colder. And then the order that turns Snape's stomach to ice. Dumbledore grows weaker, Voldemort says, fingers tapping the arm of his chair. You will remain at his side, gain his final secrets, and when I command it, Severus, you will be the one to kill him. Snape bows so Voldemort cannot see his face, because somewhere in a tower office, Dumbledore is already asking him for a different, terrible promise. 2 masters, 1 death, and only 1 story can be true. 5th year and the battle for minds, propaganda, legends, and Harry's ghost. The war for Harry Potter does not end when he dies. It mutates. It moves into portraits and pamphlets and polished stone. By 5th year, the Ministry has learned the one lesson it cares about from the night everything changed in the chamber. A dead child is a very useful weapon. Cornelius Fudge stands beneath a gleaming statue in the atrium. Harry, wand raised, robes billowing, forever 12 and forever obedient. At the base, golden letters scream, "He gave his life so you could live in peace." Fudge gestures up at it during every press conference, every new restriction, every aura raid on dangerous elements. Educational Decree number 24, Umbridge purrs at Hogwarts, pink cardigan stretched tight, quill poised. In honor of Mr. Potter's noble sacrifice, all unapproved student gatherings are hereby prohibited. He would not want his memory tainted by disorder. The silence that follows cuts through the grief like a knife, because in the corridors, the students who actually knew him remember a boy who broke rules to save a girl he barely knew. A boy who would have spat at the idea of his name being used to shut people up. The Ministry prints pamphlets with Harry's face, eyes bright, scar untouched by truth. They tell a simple story. Harry died, Voldemort did not return, the danger is over. Any talk of Dark Lords or Death Eaters is panic-mongering, treason, a slap in the face to the boy who lived then died. But the Order and what remains of Dumbledore's army tell a different story. This is that story. To them, Harry is not a marble statue. He is a question. What if the adults had listened sooner? What if the chamber had been searched properly? What if a 12-year-old had not been expected to duel a memory of Voldemort alone? In Grimmauld Place, Sirius stares at the old family tapestry and sees Harry's name burned out in his mind, not by blood purity but by institutional cowardice. In the Room of Requirement, Neville stands where Harry never stood in this timeline and says, voice shaking but clear, "He died because they underestimated Voldemort. We don't get to make that choice again." Voldemort, watching from the shadows, understands propaganda just as well. His whispers go out through Nocturne, through frightened shopkeepers and quietly marked Ministry clerks. Even the boy who lived fell before the Dark Lord. Even the child they called their savior died screaming under Hogwarts. If he could not win, what chance do you have? Rumours slither through wizarding pubs. Harry's death proves resistance is futile. Harry's sacrifice bought nothing. Harry was a warning. Ginny Weasley refuses that version. She remembers the chamber, the stink of blood and scales. Harry's hand slipping from hers. She remembers waking in the hospital wing to find him already dead, and understanding in one blinding instant that he had chosen her over his own life. So she, Ron, and Neville start their own war for the story. Underground leaflets appear in common rooms and owl posts with no sender. Crude drawings, but honest ones. Harry facing the basilisk alone, Harry stabbing the diary, Harry falling as Tom Riddle screamed and the spell light shattered. Lines scrawled beneath, "He fought. You can too." On a hijacked wireless frequency late at night, a rough teenage voice, Lee Jordan, older, angrier, tells the truth of Harry's last stand. He names the teachers who failed him and the Ministry that buried the diary report. He names Ginny as the girl who lived because Harry refused to run. In whispered stories passed bed to bed, Harry is not a perfect hero. He is a boy who was scared and went anyway. One night, the Room of Requirement fills again. Old members of the DA, new faces who only know Harry from statues and lies. Ginny steps forward, eyes red but steady. "We're not here because he was our saviour," she says. "We're here because he was one of us. And he deserved better than this." Wands lift one by one until the room is a forest of light. Not a vigil for a legend. A promise for a fallen comrade. Outside, the Ministry's Golden Harry stares down at a cowed crowd. Inside, the real Harry, messy, furious, dead too young, stands in every shaking hand that refuses to lower its wand. And somewhere far away, Voldemort feels that shift in the air and knows the battle for minds is not his yet. The Department of Mysteries Reimagined. A different prophecy heist. The chamber is open and full of whispers. Not under Hogwarts this time, but buried in the Ministry's lowest level, where time leaks and thoughts are catalogued in dust. The vigil for Harry is still burning in people's minds when Voldemort makes his next move. If the boy who lived is truly dead, if the war has already been decided, Why does he still feel the prophecy coiled around his fate like barbed wire? What if he killed the wrong boy? He knows only fragments. A child born as the 7th month dies, marked as equal. Power the Dark Lord knows not. Harry Potter is gone, but the unease will not leave him. There was another baby, another choice. Neville Longbottom, who survived, who keeps surviving. To end this story properly, Voldemort needs the full text. He needs to know whether Harry's death ended the threat, or if Neville is still the blade hanging over his head. So he reaches for the one weapon he's always trusted: deception. It begins with a vision that isn't a vision. Neville is in bed at Grimmauld Place, wand under his pillow out of habit now, when the dream slams into him. Harry's face, pale and furious and wrong, trapped behind rows of glass spheres. A whispered plea that cuts through the grief like a knife. Neville, they've got Sirius. Department of Mysteries. You have to come. He wakes up shaking. The silence in the old house is heavy, broken only by the creak of pipes and the faint mutter of Wahlburger's sealed portrait 3 floors down. He knows what real nightmares feel like. The night everything changed for him was a crib and green light and his parents' screams. This is different, sharper, intentional. Hermione stares at him across the kitchen table as he explains, voice hoarse. Ginny's hands are clenched around her mug, white-knuckled, remembering another false promise from a dark object that spoke in a boy's voice. Ron keeps glancing at the door, half expecting Sirius to stride in and tell them it's a trap. He doesn't. They choose. Of course they choose. The core of the DA slips into the ministry under invisibility cloaks and borrowed aura robes, hearts pounding. Neville leads them into the circular room of spinning doors, wand raised, every step echoing with the thought: if Voldemort has Sirius, they will not lose another father. They find the Hall of Prophecy. It is colder than Neville imagined, row upon row of glass orbs, each one a life ruined in advance. And there, on a dusty shelf, he sees the name that has haunted him since Dumbledore told him the truth. Potter, Harry James, /Longbottom, Neville. His own hand is the one that reaches out, not because a snake man orders him to, but because he needs to know what destroyed his parents, what killed his friend. This is that story. The Death Eaters step from the shadows as his fingers close around the orb. Chaos erupts. Spells scream through the air, blue and red and sickly yellow. Ginny ducks a curse that shatters a prophecy beside her, the whispering voice inside spilling out and vanishing into nothing. She is face to face with masked men who once answered to the diary's master, and something in her, still raw from the chamber, refuses to be helpless again. She hurls a bat bogey hex that sends one crashing into the shelves. Ron goes down with a slashing curse to the leg. Hermione drags him behind a row, teeth gritted against the smell of burning dust and glass. Neville's wand trembles, but he does not break. Every spell he throws is for a mother who doesn't know his name and a boy who died under a school he loved. And then Sirius is there. He arrives with the order through a side door, cloak billowing, eyes hard in a way they never were when Harry was alive. In this world, these children are all he has left of that messy, furious, dead too young boy. He fights differently because of it. No reckless lunges, no taunting. Every movement is controlled, precise, the marauder's wildness honed into a blade. "Stay behind me," he yells, back to back, with Neville, as Bellatrix's laugh cuts through the din. Ginny flanks them, jaw set, wand steady. For a heartbeat, it almost feels winnable, but the battle spills into the death chamber. The veil whispers. The air is colder here, heavier, the archway humming with the same wrongness Neville felt in his vision. Spells flash, stones crack. A curse meant for Ginny arcs wide. Sirius shoves her, takes the hit, staggers. He teeters on the edge of the veil, eyes locking with Neville's. In that suspended second, in that impossible choice, the war's next phase rewrites itself. Does Sirius fall, or does someone pay a different price to pull him back? The answer waits on the other side of the curtain. If Sirius lives, if Sirius dies, forking the emotional road. Neville's hand shoots out, too late, or perfectly timed. Two futures balance on his fingertips. In one, he misses. Sirius's heel slips on broken stone, his body arcs backward, and the veil swallows him without a sound. No heroic last words. No body. just stunned, ringing silence and the echo of Bellatrix's laughter as Neville screamed and Ginny stared at the drifting curtain, waiting for a godfather who will never step back through. In that world, the pattern holds. The adults fail. Again, Sirius's death becomes the night everything changed for the second generation. Harry is already dead in the chamber. Now the man who promised to stand in his place is gone too. Neville and Ginny walk out of the Department of Mysteries with blood on their clothes and the hollow, buzzing knowledge that the war will not spare the people they love just because they are needed. They harden. They stop asking who will save them and start planning how to become weapons. But there is another version. Another choice. Bellatrix's curse hits Sirius square in the chest. He stumbles. The arch looms behind him, whispering. Ginny doesn't think. She moves. A streak of red hair, a hand fisting in the back of his robes, boots skidding on dust. Neville grabs Ginny's arm, anchoring them both as another spell explodes against the stone. For a heartbeat, 3 bodies hang in a chain over the veil. Then they topple forward, away from death, crashing to the floor in a tangled, gasping heap. Sirius lives, but the cost is carved into him. His ribs are shattered. The curse seared through muscle and magic both, leaving his wand arm weak and his stamina wrecked. St. Mungo's healers mutter about lingering curse damage, about how another hit like that will probably kill him. He hears every word. When he's discharged, he can't duel for more than a minute without shaking. He can't chase Death Eaters through corridors the way he once chased Snape through Hogwarts. Thematically, these two paths are brutal mirrors. In the first, his death doubles down on the story this world has been telling from the beginning. Adults breaking, children picking up the pieces. In the second, his survival lets a different story take root, one where the next generation still has a flawed, frightened, infuriatingly alive adult to lean on. This is that story. Sirius survives the veil, but he is pushed off the front lines. Forced into strategy. Forced into the war room instead of the battlefield. At Grimmauld Place, maps cover the dining table. Strings link raids, names, and prophecies. Neville and Ginny sit at his elbow, not as children begging for scraps of information, but as junior commanders. Emotionally, the shift is seismic. If he had died, they would have sealed the wound with anger and marched into the dark, convinced they were already dead. Because he lives, they cling harder. Ginny visits him after every order meeting, needing to see his chest rise and fall. Neville starts copying his mannerisms without noticing. The way he leans over a map, the way he questions every ministry report, the grief is still there. Harry is still gone. But Sirius becomes the place where that grief can land without shattering. He is the father figure who refuses to leave even when his body has been half ruined by war. So we lock it in. In this AU, Sirius does not fall through the veil. He is dragged back, scarred and slowed, and the resistance reshapes itself around his survival. From here to the final battle, we follow the version of the war where the general lives to see the end, even if he can no longer charge at the front of the charge. 6th year. Without the Chosen One, Slughorn, Horcrux clues, and a different student. 6th year begins under a sky that feels lower, heavier, as if the castle itself remembers the boy who never came back from the chamber. Slughorn arrives in a puff of gold and self-satisfaction. He stares at the Great Hall, at the empty space where Harry Potter should have been, and you can see the calculation flicker in his eyes. No famous Chosen One to collect, no glittering centerpiece for his little club. So who, in this war-shadowed Hogwarts, is worth courting now? He finds them fast. Ginny Weasley, who survived the diary that screamed in her head, and left her with nights where she wakes up sure Tom Riddle is standing over her bed. Neville Longbottom, who still shakes but no longer flinches. The boy who duelled Death Eaters in the Department of Mysteries and watched Sirius Black fall and then live, half ruined, the night everything changed. Hermione Granger, dead-eyed for weeks after Harry's funeral, now throwing herself into study as if every spell is a weapon she might need tomorrow. Slughorn circles them, invites Ginny to his little suppers because she flies like a comet and is best friends with the boy who died. Praises Neville's herbology marks and his parents' aura past. Flatters Hermione's mind, her connections to the reformed House Black, her proximity to power. He calls it nurturing talent. Dumbledore calls it something else. Opportunity. So what if, in this version, Dumbledore doesn't beckon Harry to his office to speak of prophecy and destiny? What if he sends a quiet note to Ginny Weasley instead? She stands in front of his desk, fists clenched to stop the shaking. The silence between them is thick with things they never say aloud. I sent Harry into the chamber. You sent Harry into the chamber. He died for you. She remembers basilisk fangs, blood on stone, Fawkes's song cutting through the grief like a knife. She remembers waking up with the diary dead beside her, and then finding out Harry was dead too. I need your help, Dumbledore says, and the words feel wrong. Professor Slughorn possesses a memory, about Tom Riddle, about a kind of magic he should never have explained. Horcrux, the word itself feels diseased. Dumbledore explains enough. Fragments of soul, torn with murder, bound into objects. He believes the diary was one. He believes there are more. And he needs Ginny, the girl Riddle chose, to charm the man who once told Tom how to split his soul. It is a cruel choice. Ask the most haunted student in the castle to walk back into the shadow of the boy who possessed her, to smile at the professor who helped him become a monster, to pretend this is just about homework and Quidditch and her famous dead friend. She tries and fails at first. Slughorn dodges, blusters, pours more mead. He praises Harry in the past tense until Ginny wants to scream. Neville sees her come back from those evenings, pale and brittle. Hermione watches her marks slip. The three of them know this is that story, the one where children are drafted into secrets no adult will fully share. The breaking point comes in Slughorn's office, late, the air thick with potion fumes and fear. Ginny doesn't beg. She doesn't flatter. She stares him down, voice raw. He used your spell work on me, she says. On my mind. On my life. You gave him the tools and he used them to crawl inside a little girl and make her write on the walls in blood. You think your reputation is what's at stake? I wake up wondering if I'm still me. Slughorn crumples. The memory spills out of him in shimmering threads, not because he is charmed, but because he is cornered by his own guilt. Later, in the pensive room, Dumbledore and Ginny stand side by side as young Tom Riddle asks about Horcruxes. Ginny's nails dig into her palms when she hears the cool, curious tone that once whispered through her hand as she wrote. They watch Slughorn, younger and smugger, explain the unthinkable. When they surface, the world feels different, colder. Dumbledore's face is set. Not one, he says softly. Many. Ginny understands. This war will not be won by a single boy and a single spell. There are pieces of Voldemort scattered across the world, and someone, maybe her, maybe Neville, maybe all of them together, will have to hunt them down. And in the shadows of the castle, another choice is already forming. Who will walk with Dumbledore to the edge of the lightning-struck tower, now that Harry Potter is dead? Dumbledore's final lessons. Passing the torch to a group, not a boy. The answer, Dumbledore decides, is that no one walks with him alone. By the winter after Harry's death, his hand is already blackened from the ring. The curse creeps up his arm in thin, dark veins. Some nights it throbs so sharply it could have been a blade. He could hide it with spells, with robes, with practiced smiles. He does not. Not from them. Neville, Ginny, Hermione, Ron. They sit in his office past midnight, the castle sunk in silence. Fawkes staring down at them with molten gold eyes. The fire burns low. The air tastes of smoke and lemon drops and old grief. This is not detention. This is not a kindly headmaster's chat. This is a war council, and they all know it. What if, Dumbledore asks softly, I told you that Tom Riddle found a way to anchor himself to the world by tearing his soul apart? Hermione's quill stills. Ron's jaw clenches. Neville's fingers curl around the arm of his chair. Ginny stares at the diary on the desk between them, now sealed in layers of shimmering wards. Harry's blood is in that ink, in her nightmares, in the way her mother's screams still cut through the grief like a knife. He explains Horcruxes. Not in full, not the darkest rituals, but enough. That the diary was one. That there are others. That Voldemort is not just a man to be duelled, but a puzzle to be dismantled. He does what he never did with Harry. He repeats himself, cross-checks understanding, makes each of them say the words back to him until they own them. Why us? Neville whispers once when the others have gone. The moon hangs over the Quidditch pitch, cold and distant. You could tell the Order. I have told the Order some things, Dumbledore says. His eyes are tired, his voice even. But there are failures they cannot unlearn. You four have already paid the price of my earlier choices. I will not lie to you by omission again. This is that story. Every meeting after that runs the same razor's edge. His instinct screams to keep them children. His memory answers with Harry's body on the chamber floor, dead at 12 because he had been sent in blind. Protection, he realizes, is not silence. Protection is preparation. So he walks them through Voldemort's psychology, the orphanage reports, the trophies hidden in other children's things, the obsession with legacy and conquest. Hermione maps patterns on parchment. Ron points out tactical gaps the Order missed. Neville quietly suggests places in Britain steeped in old magic. Ginny, voice shaking but steady, talks about what it felt like to be possessed. Another pattern interrupt. The cave. In canon, Dumbledore takes Harry. In this timeline, he refuses to drag another child into that particular hell. He considers Ginny because she has faced a Horcrux and survived. He considers Neville because of the prophecy's shadow. He nearly asks. He does not. Instead, he takes Snape. They vanish from Hogwarts under cover of a staff meeting, leaving the teens with a different mission. Fortify the castle, test the secret passages, prepare safe routes for evacuation. Ginny organizes the DA with a ruthlessness that scares even Fred and George. Ron drills shield charms until his wand arm shakes. Hermione refines Protean-linked coins for instant alerts. Neville walks the corridors with the map and a grim, unshakable calm. When Dumbledore returns, he is weaker. The ring curse has advanced. The potion from the cave has shredded what was left of his strength. He knows the tower is coming, by curse, by Snape's hand, by battle, it hardly matters. What matters is that when he falls, he will not be abandoning a single boy with a single spell. He will be passing the war to a small, fiercely bonded group who already know the truth, who have already chosen to stand together on the night everything changed. And Voldemort has no idea they exist. Not yet. The fall of Dumbledore, a world without its last old general. The tower is already burning when they reach the courtyard. Light, green and gold and sickly purple, raining from the astronomy tower in jagged arcs. The air tastes of metal and smoke. Neville skids on broken stone, Ginny on his heels, DA wands snapping up as Death Eaters stream through the breach. This is the night everything changed, and they are late. Above them, framed against the stars, Dumbledore stands at the ramparts. He looks smaller from below, older. His robes are torn, his wand hand shaking as he holds a shimmering shield over the tower door. Spells slam into it, making the air scream. Neville can't hear words, only impact. Only the drumbeat of war against the last old general holding the line. "Professor!" Ginny screams, throat raw. The sound is swallowed by chaos. McGonagall is already there, dueling 3 masked figures at once, lips thin with fury. Remus moves like a shadow, shield and stunner, his face set in a grief he doesn't have time to feel. Somewhere to the left, Sirius crashes into a knot of black-robed attackers, a blur of wild dark hair and blue curses, as if he can outrun the memory of a godson already dead. What if they'd gotten here 2 minutes earlier? What if one more spell, one more shield, could change this story? The tower answers with a single, terrible flash. The shield collapses. A tall, black-robed figure steps through the smoke at Dumbledore's back, wand raised, face pale and unreadable. Snape. For a heartbeat, Neville's mind refuses the image. This is the man Dumbledore vouched for, the professor who, in this AU, drilled them in silent casting for when it's real. The one who was supposed to protect them. Dumbledore turns. Their eyes meet. Something passes between them that the courtyard will never know. A choice, a promise, a debt being paid in the only currency this war understands. Severus, please. The words cut through the grief like a knife. From below they see only the silhouette, the wand, the jet of green light. Neville's knees buckle as the spell hits. Ginny's nails dig into his arm hard enough to bruise. Around them, the battle stutters, then roars, because the greatest wizard alive has just fallen from a tower and hit the stones of his own school. Dumbledore is dead. For Neville, it's a second chamber. Another body on cold stone. Another impossible absence. For Ginny, it's the last adult who ever looked at her and saw more than a possessed girl and a ghost of the boy who died to save her. Harry. Sirius. If he's already fallen in some raid before this night. One by one, the anchors have been cut away. They are the oldest ones left standing who still believe this war can be won. McGonagall steps into the gap without ceremony. She's headmistress before the echoes fade, barking orders, transfiguring rubble into barricades, her eyes bright with unshed tears. Remus gathers the DA with clipped, precise instructions, turning terror into formations. Sirius, if he survives this night, moves to the edges, hunting stragglers, a grim guardian rather than a leader. But they all feel it. The centre of gravity has shifted. The war's front line is no longer in the headmaster's office or the order's safe houses. It's in the common rooms, in whispered strategies over cold tea in the room of requirement reshaping itself around teenagers who refuse to break. Hours later, the castle is bandaged and bleeding. The portraits mutter, Fawkes is gone. Neville, Ginny, Ron and Hermione stand in the empty headmaster's office, the silence heavier than any spell. The silver instruments lie dead and dark on the shelves. Dumbledore's chair is turned slightly toward the window, as if he's just stepped out and will be back with a plan. He won't. Neville stares at the desk, waiting for a letter, a prophecy, a map, some grand design to appear. Nothing does. There is no one left to hand them a plan. "This is it," Hermione whispers. "There's no backup. It's us." Ginny's voice is steady, though her hands shake. "Then we write it ourselves." What if that sentence is the most dangerous spell cast in Hogwarts that night? Because Voldemort still doesn't know their names. Not yet. Deathly Hallows. Recast. No Master of Death. Only survivors. They don't know it yet, huddled in that hidden room with ink-stained fingers and shaking hands, but this is the moment the Deathly Hallows lose their script. In the world where Harry lived, the war bent itself around a myth, 3 artifacts, 1 boy, a destiny to master death. In this story, the boy who lived is dead at 12, and the Hallows are just objects scattered across a battlefield that no longer believes in chosen ones. The Elder Wand still hums in Dumbledore's hand, old, terrible, hungry. He stands alone in his office after another funeral, fingers resting on the carved handle, and for the first time he does not feel powerful holding it. He feels cornered. What if this wand, won in a duel decades ago, is nothing but a promise that violence will always escalate? Power answering power until there is nothing left but ruins and names etched on stone. Down in the ruined gaunt shack, the resurrection stone still sleeps inside a ring, poison wrapped in poison. Dumbledore stares at it through a pensive memory, recognizing the Hallows symbol, recognizing the temptation. To call back Ariana, to ask James and Lily if he has failed their son beyond all forgiveness. The desire cuts through the grief, like a knife. He turns away. He does not put it on. The cloak is different. It lies folded in a black family trunk at Grimmauld Place, returned after the chamber as part of Harry's effects. Sirius opens the lid once, breath catching at the sight of it. A relic of schoolboy pranks and midnight wanderings, now a shroud. He could wear it. He could haunt the corridors of Hogwarts unseen, stalk Death Eaters through the Ministry. Instead, he closes the trunk, locks it. The cloak becomes not a Hallows piece, but a reminder. Invisibility did not save the child who owned it. Stories still circulate. Xenophilius Lovegood prints the Hallows symbol in the Quibbler. Old wizards mutter about the Peverils. But in the Order and in the DA, the tale is told differently. Not as a treasure hunt, as a warning. Hermione lays it out one night in the room of requirement, chalk squeaking on the board as she sketches the triangle, circle, line. 3 brothers, she says. One wanted a weapon, one wanted to undo death, one wanted to hide from it. All of them died. That's the point. Neville frowns. So we just accept it. People dying. No. Her voice is rough. We accept that no spell, no artifact, no legend is going to make death fair. Our choice is what we do before it finds us. This war will not be won by a master of death. It will be won, if it is won at all, by a network of exhausted teenagers, bitter veterans, and stubborn parents who know they might not see the end and fight anyway. By Ginny, who wakes up screaming some nights with Tom Riddle's laughter in her ears and still walks into strategy meetings with her head high. By Neville, who keeps showing up even when his hands won't stop shaking around his wand. The closest any of them come to the old myth is in a shattered corridor of Hogwarts months later when they finally track down the Gaunt Ring. Dumbledore is gone by then. Snape lies dead in the shrieking shack. It's Neville, Ginny, and Hermione standing over the cracked flagstones, the ring glinting in torchlight. Ginny's breath hitches. If it's really the stone... Her mind flashes to Harry on the chamber floor, to Fred's empty bed, to the way her mother stared at the kitchen clock after Percy vanished from the burrow. What if she could see them? Hear them? Say goodbye properly? Hermione doesn't touch it. It's a Horcrux first, she says quietly. A Hallow second. Voldemort made his choice. We make ours. Neville lifts his wand. No hesitation this time. We destroy it. Ginny nods. Turns away before the spell lands. The ring screams, the stone cracks, and something old and hungry dies with it. They don't master death that night. They choose the living instead. And that choice is what turns a legend into a footnote, and a scattered resistance into a real war. The year of occupation. Hogwarts under siege and the DA's underground war. The year after the ring is destroyed, Hogwarts feels wrong the moment the boats touch shore. The towers are the same. The lake is the same. The castle hums with old magic. But under it all, there's a new vibration. A low, constant tension, as if the stone itself knows the war has finally come home. The Carrows arrive with smiles that don't reach their eyes. Amicus in greasy robes, Alecto with her thick fingers resting too easily on her wand. They don't bother to hide what they are. This is not a school, they tell the Great Hall. This is a training ground. Muggleborns are dragged out first. Names read from a roll that should have been a class list and now sounds like a list of the condemned. Some are transferred to the Ministry for questioning, some just vanish. The silence that follows each name cut through the grief like a knife. Defense against the dark arts becomes dark arts. Not theory, practice. They demonstrate the Cruciatus on a terrified third year who screamed until she couldn't make sound anymore. Detention means chains in the dungeons, or Amicus forcing students to curse each other until someone collapses. What if you refuse? You become the lesson. Neville watches it all and feels something inside him lock into place. The boy who once shook holding his wand now stares Amicus down in the corridor and doesn't flinch when the man snarls, "Longbottom," like a curse. He starts small, a staircase that shifts at just the wrong moment and dumps a snatcher patrol into a trick step. A banner of the new regime that catches fire, spellwork misfiring in a way no one can quite trace. Detention notices that vanish from common room tables. Guerrilla tactics, born from desperation and the memory of Harry choosing the living instead of chasing power. This is that story. The one where Neville doesn't wait to be chosen. He chooses himself. Ginny is his shadow and his echo. When she's at Hogwarts, she moves through the castle with deliberate care, slipping passwords into the hands of terrified first years, turning DA meetings into precision drills. She smuggles in charmed galleons, restores the old communication web Hermione once designed, and adds a new layer. Coded phrases that ride out on Owl Post, folded into letters that talk about homework and weather, but really map raids and casualties. When the Carrows catch her leading a sabotage run on the Quidditch pitch, it's the night everything changed again. The punishment is savage. The threat to the Weasleys is worse. She's pulled from school for her own safety. And the Carrows smirk because they think they've cut the head off the snake. They haven't. Ginny becomes the outside line, passing messages between the DA and the scattered order. Her grief for Harry and for the kids she left behind, turning every choice into a weapon. Inside, Harry's name becomes a forbidden legend. First years whisper in their beds about the boy who went down into the dark and never came back. The one who died fighting Voldemort's monster under the very floors they walk. Some say he still haunts the pipes. Some say he's not dead at all, just waiting. Either way, the story moves through the dormitories faster than any spell. In the room of requirement, the DA gathers one night after a particularly brutal week. Neville's face is bruised. Seamus's hands still shake from casting a curse he didn't want to use. Ginny's latest note burns in Neville's pocket. No one speaks at first. Then Neville steps forward, raises his wand, and carves words into the stone where they all can see. For Harry, for the fallen, for the ones still here. The wall seals the oath. The war inside Hogwarts truly begins. The final Horcrux hunt. A team effort, not a solo quest. The oath on the wall is barely dry when the real plan begins. Not a prophecy. A timetable. In Grimmauld Place, the war room is a map of desperation. Strings, pins, moving portraits. Horcruxes circled in violent red. The locket Regulus stole. The cup in Bellatrix's vault. The snake that never leaves Voldemort's side. And one more, already destroyed in this story. The diary that cut through the grief like a knife when they realized Harry died for it. "This is it," Hermione says, voice raw but steady. "Once these are gone, he's just a dark wizard with too much power." She doesn't say dead boy. She doesn't say Harry. The silence screams it for her. They divide the war. Ron and Hermione take Gringotts. Of course they do. Ron knows how goblins think from years of listening to Bill. Hermione has memorized half their legal code. They go under Polyjuice, under curse, under the weight of every choice that led them here. If they fail, Voldemort keeps his cup. If they succeed, they might not get out. Neville and Ginny are given Nagini, the living Horcrux, the one that moves, that strikes, that remembers. "Why me?" Neville asks, staring at the snake's moving image on the table. He can still hear the prophecy's echo, the way Dumbledore once whispered that it could have been him or Harry. What if this is the moment that decides which boy the war truly belonged to? "Because you're the one who stands and keeps standing," McGonagall answers. Her voice is thin with grief, iron with resolve, and because she won't let it end any other way. Ginny doesn't flinch. She remembers ink on her hands, black words on a blank page, Tom's voice in her head. Facing Nagini means facing that the diary wasn't just a cursed object. It was a piece of him. Another soul fragment coiled around her throat. The missions run in parallel, time to the second. Remus and Kingsley go after the locket, coordinating with Kreacher, who knows every inch of the cave Regulus died to escape. McGonagall and a small order team move on a hidden artifact Dumbledore suspected, but never confirmed. A ring that once sat on a gaunt finger, now warded in a forsaken shack. Pattern interrupt. What if Voldemort feels each one die? That's the risk. Hermione calculates it like an equation. If they strike one Horcrux at a time, he has space to react, to vanish, to fortify Hogwarts, or Azkaban, or the Ministry. So they choose the harder path. Synchronized destruction. Limited basilisk venom from the chamber. One vial of fiend fire in a cursed crystal phial. Goblin-forged blades, silver and cold. In the Lestrange vault, dragonfire roars. Hermione's hands shake as she raises the fang because if she miscasts, if she drops it, if she fails now, Harry's death becomes meaningless. She drives the venom into the cup. It screams. The spellwork around them detonates. In the forest, Neville lunges when Nagini rears for Ginny's throat. His blade is clumsy, his fear of snakes a living thing under his skin, but he does it anyway. The cut is deep. Venom hisses. The snake convulses and goes dead. In the cave, Remus pours basilisk venom over the locket while Kreacher sobs Regulus's name. In the shack, McGonagall's wand is a metronome of precision as fiendfire eats the ring. 4 deaths. 1 scream. It rips across magical Britain, a psychic howl that makes windows shatter and owls drop from the sky. Every witch and wizard feels it in their bones. Something fundamental has broken. Voldemort reels. For a heartbeat, he is just a man whose anchors have been severed. The Horcruxes are gone. Everyone in that war room knows there is only one thing left to do. They have to face him. Directly. On ground of their choosing, or his. The Battle of Hogwarts. Without Harry, new heroes at the front. They choose Hogwarts. Not because it is safe, but because it is home, and because war has already hollowed its corridors. The night everything changed begins with a whisper through the secret passages, a password on a scrap of parchment, a silver coin heating against a scarred palm. Neville's coin burns first. He is in the room of requirements, staring at the crude map they've carved into a table when the metal sears his skin. Day. Hogwarts. Now. His heart lurches. This is that story. The one where there is no Harry to lead the charge, and they go anyway. What if the Resistance didn't wait for a saviour? What if the children Harry died to protect decided their grief would not end in silence? The castle answers them. Hatches grind open. Tapestries ripple. From hidden bolt holes and forgotten classrooms, DA members emerge. Seamus with singed eyebrows and a grim set to his mouth. Luna dreamy-eyed but wand-steady. Tiny first-years who should be in bed, clutching their wands like lifelines. Through the Hogshead passage, the Order floods in. Remus, Tonks, Kingsley, Sirius with his jaw clenched so hard it might crack. Behind them, Aberforth nods once and seals the way. Teachers move like a second wave. Flitwick etches wards into stone with a flick of his wand. Sprout drags crates of venomous plants into choke points. In the courtyard, McGonagall stands rigid as the knight, then raises her wand and screams, "Pia totem locomotor!" Statues shudder awake. Stone knights lower spears. Gargoyles flex wings that shower dust. The castle itself is choosing a side. On the 7th floor bridge, Neville and Ginny stand shoulder to shoulder, the air sharp with the smell of rain and burning dust. They are not Harry. Together they are something else. Neville thinks of prophecy, of Dumbledore's quiet admission that the choice could once have fallen on him. His wand does not shake. "We hold this line," he says. Simple, final. Ginny stares out into the darkness where Death Eaters gather, black against black. Her grief for Harry is a constant ache, but tonight it hardens into purpose that could cut through the grief like a knife. The first wave hits. Spells claw across the gap. The bridge erupts in fire and splinters. Neville's shield charms slam into place, thicker than anyone remembers him casting, born of years under Carrow rule and DA drills. When the wooden planks behind him explode, he doesn't flinch. He drives forward, hammering curses into masked figures, forcing them back step by step. Below, in the courtyard, Ginny becomes a streak of red and gold. She duels the ones who once answered to the diary's master, those who laughed about a little girl in a cold stone tunnel. One Death Eater rips off his mask long enough to sneer. Potter died for nothing. To be wrong, she says, voice shaking. But to be wrong, she says, voice shaking but deadly calm. Elsewhere, Neville crashes directly into Voldemort's inner circle. Dolohof's curse grazes his ribs. Bellatrix's laughter screams across the courtyard. For a moment he is 12 again, terrified. Then he remembers his parents, dead in all but body, and Harry, dead in truth, and his fear burns out. He plants himself between them and a cluster of younger students. "You want a long bottom?" he shouts. "Come and get me." The battle rages until the stones themselves seem to bleed. Then, a voice, cold and amplified, rolls across the grounds. "Enough!" Spells gutter out. A forced ceasefire drops over Hogwarts like a shroud. In the sudden, awful silence, Voldemort's words curl through the smoke. "Bring me Neville Longbottom," he says, "and I will spare the rest." Every eye turns to Neville, and he has one breath, one choice to decide how this story continues. The last stand. Neville faces Voldemort. Where Harry once fell, the chamber is open and full of whispers. Not the first time. Not the night everything changed when a 12-year-old boy went down and never came back. This time the stone corridors tremble with footsteps, torchlight, and the low, ragged breathing of an army that's already lost too much. Neville stares at the sink that hides the entrance, at the place where Harry disappeared, where Ginny woke up screaming and covered in ink and blood. What if he had come down here then? What if someone had believed that this place would matter again? He steps forward before anyone can stop him. "I'll go," he says, voice steady. "But I'm not going alone." Voldemort's magic drags them anyway. A wrenching pull, a rush of green-tinged darkness, and then they're there, deep beneath Hogwarts, where the air tastes of damp stone and old poison. The basilisk's corpse lies half-submerged in black water, its blank eyes a monument to a boy who died trying to be enough. Voldemort stands where Tom Riddle once stood, pale, serpentine, wand loose at his side, as if none of this is a war, only an inevitable ending. "So," he says softly, voice amplified, curling around the pillars, "we return to the scene of the first failure." His red eyes flick to the bones, to the stains only some of them can see. This is where your little hero died, Longbottom. The boy who lived until he didn't. This place proved long ago that children cannot defeat me. The words cut through the grief like a knife. Ginny flinches. Ron's hands ball into fists. Hermione's breath hitches. Neville feels it all. The years of silence about what really happened here. The way the adults spoke around Harry's name as if saying it too loud might break them. The way Sirius and Remus looked every time they passed a closed door in Grimmauld Place and remembered the child who should have been there. He lifts his wand. "You're right," he says. "Harry couldn't defeat you because you didn't just fight him. You buried him. You lied about him. You made him die alone." He takes one step forward, then another. "That's why you're going to lose to me. Because I'm not alone." Ginny moves to his right, jaw set. The girl who woke up in a pool of ink and guilt and chose to come back anyway. Hermione to his left, eyes burning with every spell Sirius and Remus ever drilled into her. Ron beside Ginny, wand raised, shoulders squared in a way that says he's done letting his friends die for him. Behind them, others. D.A. veterans, Order members, Hogwarts staff, no single chosen one. A line of people who made the same choice. Stand here or watch the story end in darkness. Voldemort laughs, thin and sharp. You think numbers matter? Power is singular. It is mine. It has always been mine. His wand snaps up. Avada! Protego Maxima! Hermione screams, their shields slamming together, overlapping, reinforcing. Spells crash in the air, bright and brutal. Red against green, gold against sickly blue. The chamber becomes a storm of light and stone dust. This is not Harry versus Voldemort. This is Voldemort versus everyone Harry ever saved and everyone who learned from his absence. Neville duels with a memory in his chest. Every time Voldemort taunts, he hears Harry's laugh in the Gryffindor common room that never was. The training sessions Sirius described. The way Remus whispered. He should have had a chance to be ordinary. Crucio! Voldemort snarls. Neville's shield shatters, pain licking his nerves, but Ginny's spell slams in from the side, breaking the curse's line. Ron's jinx forces Voldemort to twist. Hermione's silent hex clips his wand arm. Power shared. Burden divided. Every opening one of them buys. Another exploits. Neville sees it. The tiniest stagger. The way Voldemort's attention flickers, just for a breath, to the dead basilisk and the place where Harry's body once lay. He doesn't hesitate. Expelliarmus! It's almost simple. A disarming spell thrown with everything he is. His parents' screams in St. Mungo's, Harry's body on a cold stone floor he never saw. The years of being almost chosen and finally deciding that being chosen is less important than choosing. Voldemort's wand flies. His own curse rebounds, wild and uncontrolled, slamming back into the fragile soul holding his body together. This time he dies surrounded, by witnesses, by fighters, by children who grew up in the shadow of a dead boy and refused to let that be the end of the story. The echo of the spell fades. The chamber falls into ringing silence. And in that silence, everyone understands exactly what it cost to get here. This is that story. Aftermath. A world that lost its boy. Hero too soon. In the hours after the echo of that last spell, Hogwarts feels hollowed out. The battle smoke clears. The screaming stops. What remains is counting. Madame Pomfrey moves through the Great Hall with hands that do not tremble until she thinks no one is watching. House elves lay out sheets. Professors bend over students, checking pulses, whispering diagnostic charms that cut through the grief like a knife. McGonagall's voice is a rasp as she calls names, waiting for answers, bracing for silence. And beneath it all, the chamber waits. They go back. They have to. Auras, curse breakers, a handful of professors. Neville insists on being there. So does Ginny. Hermione walks between them, jaw locked, wand tight in her fist. The descent is the same as the night everything changed. Damp stone, the stench of old death, the oppressive sense of being watched. Only this time, the basilisk is a carcass. Voldemort's final body lies where he fell, twisted and small. The chamber is a tomb and a victory monument in one, a place where a boy died at 12 and a war finally, truly ended years later. What if history ever manages to hold both truths at once? The Ministry tries to decide for it. In the weeks that follow, memorials rise everywhere. The Fountain of Magical Brethren is replaced by a wall of names, etched in black stone, stretching farther than anyone wants to measure. Harry James Potter is not at the end of the list. He's near the beginning, a date of death that shocks visitors into staring twice. First casualty of the Second War, the plaque reads. Hermione hates that line. Ginny can't look at it. Neville quietly asks a stonemason to add others around Harry's, Colin Creevey, Fred Weasley, Remus Lupin, Nymphadora Tonks, so no one can pretend one dead child carried the whole thing on his shoulders. Because that's the temptation. To make it simple. To say, Harry died, the war began, heroes rose, villains fell, the end. Clean. Marketable. A story you can tell to children without your voice shaking. They don't let that happen. When textbooks start calling Neville the chosen one, he sends them back with entire chapters corrected in red ink. Ginny writes her own account of the diary, of possession, of walking into the chamber the second time, wand raised, not as a damsel but as a survivor who made a choice. Hermione publishes a brutal history of Ministry failures, naming the laws, the delays, the willful blindness that left a Horcrux under a school and a boy dead in its depths. Policy follows shame. There are open trials for Death Eaters this time, no secret deals in back rooms. A Department of Student Safety is created with real teeth. Independent oversight, mandatory evacuation protocols, wards keyed to underage signatures, so no headmaster can ignore danger again. Every reform speech mentions Harry. Not as a legend, as a preventable loss. Years pass. On a bright afternoon, children in Hogwarts scarves stand before a grave at Godric's Hollow. The headstone is simple. The dates are not. One boy frowns. He was our age, he says, when he died. Ginny, older now, leans on her walking stick and tells them the whole story. How the boy who lived also died. How his death did not end the war, and his absence did not stop them from winning it. How a world built on one saviour almost lost everything when that saviour fell. This is that story, she finishes softly. Both parts matter. The children stare at the name in the stone, at the flowers, at the lightning carved beneath the dates. And for the first time they understand that the question is not just what if Harry had lived, but what they choose to do with the world he left behind. Character fates, where Ginny, Neville, Ron and Hermione. Go from here, years pass. The stone weathers. The name does not. Neville comes first in this part of the story. He always thought the prophecy would crush him. For a long time it did. There are nights he wakes sweating, hearing his Gran's voice, hearing Dumbledore's low confession about the child who might have been chosen. Harry died. The war did not. That knowledge cut through the grief like a knife. So he makes a choice. He stays at Hogwarts. Apprentices under Sprout, learns every plant that heals and every plant that kills. He's the one who pushes for a new curriculum after the war, when the Ministry finally admits that a generation of children were sent into battle without the right spells, the right training, the right support. Practical defense, trauma-informed teaching. Greenhouses repurposed as quiet rooms for students who screamed in their sleep. Professor Longbottom, the quiet war hero who never forgets that the boy who lived died in second year, because adults were not ready. Ginny takes longer to find her path. The chamber never leaves her. Some days she still feels the diary's whisper at the back of her skull, Tom Riddle's cold amusement as Harry's body hit the stone. She spends years flinching from mirrors, from closed notebooks, from the sudden awful silence of an empty room. What if she lets that define her? What if she doesn't? She joins the auras, not to chase glory, but to hunt objects. Cursed lockets, possessed jewellery, diaries that think. She becomes the witch they call when a family heirloom starts writing back, when a child stares too long at a darkly gleaming artifact. Her reports change policy, mandatory artifact screening, new laws about enchanted journals, a registry for items older than a century. Later, when the war's worst is over, she helps build a small, fierce unit of healers and curse breakers who specialize in possession and mind magic. Every patient is, in her mind, another 11-year-old in a cold chamber, waiting for someone who might not arrive. Ron stands at a crossroads no prophecy ever named. Without Harry, he is no one's sidekick. That hurts. It also frees him. He spends the rest of his Hogwarts years angry, then determined. Strategy becomes his refuge. Chessboards, battle maps, ministry flowcharts. He sees patterns in corruption the way he once saw openings in a game. After the war, he goes inside the machine that failed them. Department of Magical Law Enforcement. Internal Oversight. He is the one who insists that no single office, no single headmaster, ever again holds unchecked power over children's lives. In another timeline, he might have run a joke shop. Here, he still spends evenings at Weasley's Wizard Wheezes with George, rebuilding joy one product at a time because the world nearly forgot how to laugh, and Ron refuses to let that be the final spell cast on it. Hermione becomes the architect. Laws, creatures, schools. She never stops seeing Harry on the floor of the chamber when she drafts a statute or stands before the Wizengamot. House elf protections. Werewolf employment rights. Oversight on magical guardianship so no child vanishes into a cupboard again because a headmaster thought it was for the greater good. But she knows now that information alone isn't enough. She saw a boy with all the books in the world still die because adults hesitated. So she builds networks, not pedestals. Student unions at Hogwarts, community defense groups in Hogsmeade and beyond. She writes guides in plain language, teaches parents and children the spells no one taught them soon enough. And every year, on the anniversary of the night everything changed, the four of them meet at his grave. Neville brings a small, stubborn plant that thrives in poor soil. Ginny brings a confiscated trinket, neutralized and harmless, and leaves it as a warning. Ron brings a folded copy of the latest reform bill, edges worn from his hands. Hermione brings notes from a class where first years debated power and responsibility. They stand in the soft evening light, update him on the world he never got to grow into, and let the silence stretch. Everything we are, Hermione says once, voice rough, is because you didn't get the chance to be it first. The wind moves through the grass. No prophecy answers. But the story does not feel done, because if Harry's death shattered the old world, what they build now will decide what rises from the pieces. This is that story, reframing the prophecy. From one boy to a generation. The prophecy is the ghost that never leaves the room. The one with the power to vanquish the Dark Lord approaches. Born to those who have thrice defied him. Born as the 7th month dies. In the old world, every eye turned to a single crib. Harry Potter, the answer in a scar. Neville Longbottom, the almost. One boy chosen. One boy spared. A war balanced on a nursery rhyme. But what if that was the first mistake? In this story, the night everything changed isn't Godric's Hollow. It's the chamber. A 12-year-old boy, dead on cold stone, a diary still humming with trapped soul, and a phoenix's tears falling too late to matter. Dumbledore hears the echo of Sybil Trelawney's voice and realizes with a kind of horror that he has read it wrong. Not the words, the shape. Either must die at the hand of the other, for neither can live while the other survives. It sounded so clean when it was Harry, a single duel, a single sacrifice, the fantasy of a neat ending to a filthy war. But Harry's body on that floor cuts through the grief like a knife and shows them what the line really means. As long as Voldemort's idea survives, no one truly lives. So the prophecy stretches. It stops being a spotlight and becomes a searchlight sweeping across a generation. Harry's death rips away the luxury of waiting for a savior. Sirius and Remus can't cling to the myth of the boy who lived. The boy is dead. McGonagall cannot tell herself that Potter will handle it. The Weasleys cannot pray that their children will simply orbit the Chosen One and come home safe. Every adult who stared at that prophecy in Dumbledore's office has to make a different choice. Train them all, or bury more children. That's why the DA, when it forms, is not a fan club. It's conscription by consent. Hermione and Neville don't stand at the front of the room of requirement as substitutes for Harry. They stand there as proof that the prophecy has been reread. Wands out. Hands shaking. No one pretending this is a story where one hero absorbs all the danger so the rest can stay innocent. On Horcrux missions, the burden splits again. Hermione brews, researches, plans. Neville carries Gryffindor's sword with the steady terror of someone who has seen a friend die for a girl in a corridor and refuses to repeat the pattern. Ginny volunteers to face the diary's echo when they finally drag it out of the chamber, her voice shaking as she says, "It was my life he traded for. I'm not hiding from it." Who, in that moment, is the chosen one? By the final battle, the answer is obvious. The DA doesn't wait for a signal from a single figure. They move in squads, shield chains, rotating healers, Luna pulling hexed first years behind cover, Dean and Seamus holding a staircase, Neville dueling with a stubborn, brutal patience of someone who understands that prophecy is not permission to die. It's a demand to live well enough to fight. The moral shifts. It is no longer the chosen one sacrifices himself to save everyone. Harry already did that, and it was not enough. The new vow is quieter and far more radical. Everyone chooses together to stop feeding children to the fire and calling it fate. In this AU, the prophecy was never about Harry or Neville alone. It was a question, not a script. Would an entire generation accept the cycle Voldemort embodied, power built on young bodies and old fear, or would they break it, even if it meant sharing the terror instead of outsourcing it to a single boy with a scar? The answer is still being written when the war ends. Because prophecies don't close books. People do. And in the silence after the last spell, they have to decide what kind of world makes sure there is never a need for another chosen child at all. What we gain, what we lose. Comparing canon to this darker timeline. What does this darker world actually gain, and what does it lose when Harry dies in the chamber? On paper, some of the gains look undeniable. His death is a shock that cuts through the grief like a knife and strips away the Ministry's illusion of competence. A 12-year-old boy who lived dies under their noses, in their safest school, and no amount of smiling press conferences can bury that. Fudge's fear shows earlier. Bones? Shacklebolt? Amelia's allies start asking the questions they only whisper in canon. The war stops being a rumour and becomes a fact. Sirius and Remus in this story refuse to let Harry's name be a shield for anyone's failure. Their rage is focused, legal, political, relentless. They drag Pettigrew's betrayal and the Ministry's negligence into the light. Azkaban records are reopened. Sirius is cleared years earlier than in canon, not because the system feels merciful, but because it's cornered. That single choice reshapes everything. Two marauders free, armed with truth and grief, are far more dangerous than one traumatized teenager. Hogwarts changes too. No one can pretend defense against the dark arts is just another subject when a basilisk has prowled the pipes and a child is dead. Dueling clubs stop being curiosities and become standard. Ginny, Neville, Hermione, even the younger Hufflepuffs and Ravenclaws are taught shields, Patronus basics, counter-curses. Not in secret, not as a last resort, but as a curriculum. The resistance decentralizes. Instead of one boy in the Forbidden Forest, you get dozens of students who know what a killing curse sounds like and refuse to ever hear it unanswered. But the losses are brutal. Harry's perspective is gone. The boy who would have stood in front of a forest full of Death Eaters and said, "I don't want anyone else to die for me," never grows old enough to make that choice. The awkward, halting redemption arc between him and Snape never happens. Snape still stares at a pair of green eyes in his nightmares, but there is no moment on a shattered battlefield where those eyes look back and choose to forgive him, even a little. There is also no King's Cross limbo. No quiet, impossible conversation between Harry and the echo of his parents that lets him walk back into the war with a strange, hard-won peace. In canon, that scene closes a circle. Here, the circle is jagged, unfinished, edged in guilt for everyone who loved him. Other characters expand to fill the silence he leaves. Neville steps into danger sooner, not because of a prophecy speech, but because he watched a friend die and swore that no one else would be taken while he stood by. Ginny carries the memory of the diary's voice and the weight of knowing someone died to pull her out of the dark. Their arcs deepen, their courage hardens, but it is courage born from a grave under the Hogwarts grounds.